The gunshot split the air inside the Crystal Pavilion ballroom before anyone could scream. Elena Hartwell watched the assassin's weapon swing toward her chest with the slow-motion clarity of someone about to die. Chandeliers trembled overhead, their crystal pendants scattering light like falling diamonds across 300 frozen guests in evening wear. The orchestra had stopped mid-note violins, suspended the conductor's baton hanging in space. 3 months of marriage flashed through her mind in that fraction of a second. The contract signed in a Manhattan courthouse. The careful distance maintained across 4,000 square feet of penthouse. The quiet man who pushed a cleaning cart through her building's hallways, who read bedtime stories to a 6-year-old girl who made coffee exactly the way she liked it without ever being asked. 1 second remained. Then movement. Marcus Cole ceased to exist in the space he had occupied. The 54-year-old maintenance worker with salt and pepper hair and the apologetic posture of someone who had learned to be invisible transformed into something else entirely. His hand caught the gunman's wrist and twisted with a precise rotation that spoke of muscle memory burned deep through decades of practice. Bone cracked loud enough to puncture the ballroom's sudden silence. The weapon clattered to the marble floor. Marcus positioned himself between Elena and the chaos, his gray eyes colder than winter steel, scanning the room for additional threats with the mechanical efficiency of a targeting system. Armed security guards who had been hired to protect tonight's charity gala lay scattered across the floor, incapacitated before most guests had registered the attack. Elena stared at the man she had married for convenience. The man who had just broken another man's arm the way someone else might snap a pencil. She had married a ghost with a trigger finger. 3 months earlier, the problem had been simpler. The boardroom on Hartwell Defense Industries' 47th floor smelled like expensive leather and barely concealed ambition. Elena stood at the head of the mahogany conference table, while 11 men watched her with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. Manhattan spread below them through floor-to-ceiling windows, a kingdom of glass towers that technically belonged to her now. Technically, if she could keep it. Walter Kensington leaned back in his chair, his jowls quivering with indignation that had been building for 6 months. The 67-year-old CFO had worked with her father since the company's founding 3 decades ago. That history apparently gave him permission to question everything she did, every decision she made, every breath she took in what he clearly still considered Edward Hartwell's office. His voice carried across the silence with the weight of accumulated grievance. "You're married to whom?" Elena kept her spine straight, her shoulders back. Power was 90% posture, and 10% not letting them see you sweat. Her mother had taught her that in the brief years before cancer had stolen her away. Her father had reinforced it through decades of watching him command rooms full of men who underestimated him at their peril. His name is Marcus Cole. We were married 3 days ago in a private ceremony. The room erupted. Margaret Stone, the general counsel, stopped her metronomic pen tapping against her legal pad. The woman's expression suggested she was already calculating liability implications, regulatory notifications, shareholder communications. Richard Dawes, the vice president of operations, with a politician's smile and a snake's instincts, exchanged a loaded glance with Walter that communicated volumes about late-night phone calls and contingency plans. Your father's will explicitly states you must be married before your 46th birthday to maintain controlling interest in the company. Margaret's voice cut through the rising murmurs. That deadline was yesterday. Was yesterday. Elena repeated, allowing herself a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Which is why I'm married. The terms of the inheritance have been satisfied. My lawyers filed the necessary documentation with probate court this morning. Walter's face achieved an alarming shade of purple that clashed with his silver tie. You're telling us that you found someone, courted them, and married them in what, less than a week? Forgive me, Miss Hartwell, but that strains credulity to the breaking point. The use of Miss instead of Mrs. was not accidental. Elena noted it, filed it away for future reference in the long game she was playing against men who had never respected her and never would. I don't recall asking for your forgiveness, Mr. Kensington, or requiring your belief. I'm informing you of a legal fact, nothing more. Richard Dawes cut in before Walter could escalate further. He was far more dangerous than Walter's blunt hostility, a man who knew how to bury knives with a handshake and a sympathetic nod. We have a right to know who this man is. After all, as your husband, he'll have certain access to you to company information. Surely you understand our concern for the security implications. Elena had anticipated this angle. She had prepared for every question, every attack vector, every possible way they might try to invalidate her marriage or her claim to her father's company. What she had not prepared for was the knot of something uncomfortable that twisted in her stomach when Richard said the word husband. Because Marcus Cole was not really her husband, not in any way that mattered beyond the legal paperwork that had saved her inheritance. Mr. Cole has signed an extensive prenuptial agreement. He has no stake in Hartwell Defense, no access to proprietary information, and no interest in my business affairs. This is a personal matter that satisfies a legal requirement. That's all. Then why marry him at all? Walter's voice carried genuine confusion beneath the anger. Why not find someone more suitable? Someone from our circle, someone with connections, someone you could... The door opened before he could finish the sentence. Marcus Cole pushed a cleaning cart into the boardroom, eyes downcast, posture apologetic. He wore the standard maintenance uniform, a gray shirt and darker gray pants, both slightly too large for his lean frame. A baseball cap shadowed his face. He moved with the careful invisibility of someone who had learned to go unnoticed in spaces where he did not belong. Sorry. His voice was quiet, the Texas accent softening vowels in a way that made him seem smaller, less threatening. Thought the room was empty. I'll come back. Elena's pulse kicked up a notch. This was not planned. Marcus was not supposed to be here, was not supposed to reveal himself like this in front of the entire board. But perhaps his timing was perfect in ways neither of them had anticipated. Mr. Cole. Her voice stopped him mid-retreat. Actually, your timing is excellent. Everyone, I'd like you to meet my husband. The silence that followed could have shattered diamonds. Marcus's head came up slowly, and for just a fraction of a second, Elena saw something flicker in his gray eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or calculation. The rapid assessment of a man evaluating a changed situation and adjusting his response accordingly. Then it vanished, replaced by a carefully neutral expression that gave away nothing at all. Ma'am, he kept his tone respectful, uncertain. You sure about this? Quite sure. Walter Kensington made a sound somewhere between a cough and a dying animal. Margaret Stone's mouth had fallen open in a way that would have been comic under other circumstances. Richard Dawes looked like he had been struck by lightning and was still processing the voltage. This is a joke. Walter's voice cracked on the last word. This has to be a joke. You married the help. I married a man who asked for nothing, expected nothing, and signed papers that guarantee him nothing. Elena's voice cut through the rising chaos with the precision of a surgical instrument, which makes him considerably more trustworthy than anyone currently sitting at this table. Marcus remained motionless by the door hands loose at his sides. To anyone watching, he looked uncomfortable, a working-class man caught in a world he did not understand. But Elena had learned to read the subtle tells over the 3 weeks since their first conversation. The way his weight distributed on the balls of his feet, ready to move in any direction. The slight angle of his shoulders that kept both the door and the windows in his peripheral vision. The calculated stillness that could explode into motion without warning. He was not uncomfortable. He was ready. For what she still was not entirely sure. The meeting dissolved into arguments and accusations as Elena gathered her papers and walked toward the door. She had delivered her message. The board would fall in line eventually. They had no choice. Her father had been many things, most of them complicated, but his will had been airtight. Marry before 46, or lose everything to a foundation that would dismember the company piece by piece. She had satisfied the terms. That was all that mattered. Marcus stepped aside to let her pass, and their eyes met for a brief moment. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the performance they had just delivered together. Two co-conspirators recognizing each other across a divide of secrets neither had fully revealed. "Ma'am," he said softly. "Mr. Cole." She nodded once, crisp and professional, then swept from the room with the chaos of 11 confused and angry men rising behind her. 3 weeks earlier, the desperation had tasted different. Elena's office was always empty after midnight. She preferred it that way. No assistants hovering with messages and scheduling conflicts. No board members dropping by with quick questions that consumed hours. Just her the city lights and the endless scroll of financial projections that determined whether Hartwell Defense survived its next quarter. Her father had built an empire on military contracts and cutting-edge defense systems. Then he had died 6 months ago, suddenly and without warning, leaving her with a company she had spent her entire life preparing to lead, and a will that seemed designed to destroy her. The inheritance clause had haunted her for 2 decades. Marry before 46, or lose controlling interest. Her father had imposed it when she was 23, fresh from her MBA, convinced she was too focused on work to ever build a family. He had meant it as motivation, he claimed. A way to ensure she did not end up like him after her mother died, married to the job alone in a penthouse full of expensive furniture and empty rooms. Instead, it had become a countdown to catastrophe. The cleaning cart's approach barely registered at first. She had trained herself not to hear the maintenance staff. They were background noise, part of the building's infrastructure, invisible. But this one stopped. This one watched the financial news on her wall-mounted television with the kind of attention that suggested he actually understood what he was seeing. "You followed the markets." The question came out more curious than accusatory. Elena looked up from her laptop to find a man in gray standing beside the conference table at her office's far end, methodically wiping down the surface. His attention, however, was fixed on Bloomberg's coverage of Southeast Asian currency fluctuations. He glanced at her, seemingly surprised she was still there. His eyes were gray, unusual and striking, holding an intelligence that did not match the baggy uniform. Sometimes, the single word carried weight. Not dismissive, not apologetic, just measured. The response of a man who chose his words carefully and meant what he said. Elena closed her laptop slowly, her attention fully engaged now. There was something about this man, something that did not add up. Maintenance workers did not typically watch currency markets with that level of focus. They did not hold themselves with that particular stillness that suggested coiled readiness. What do you think of Hartwell Defense's Q3 projections? Most people would have deflected. Most people working night maintenance would not have an opinion on quarterly earnings reports, let alone projections that had not been made public yet. She expected him to shrug, to retreat into the safety of ignorance. Instead, he paused, set down his cloth, looked at her directly. I think you're overextended in Malaysia. Currency fluctuations are going to hit harder than your analysts expect. The baht's unstable, and your supply chain through Singapore has vulnerabilities you haven't addressed. Elena's fingers stopped moving on her keyboard. The Southeast Asian expansion was classified, or as classified as corporate strategy could be. The projections were not public. The Kuala Lumpur facility was barely more than blueprints and non-disclosure agreements. The Singapore supply chain issues had not even been brought to the board yet. How do you know about Malaysia? I read. He shrugged, the gesture somehow making him seem both humble and evasive at the same time. And people leave papers lying around. You'd be surprised what maintenance sees. It was a reasonable explanation. It was also exactly what someone with training in intelligence gathering would say. Elena studied him more carefully. Maybe 53, 54 years old. Lean in a way that suggested endurance rather than gym workouts, the kind of build that came from functional strength rather than aesthetic goals. His face was unremarkable at first glance, the sort that disappeared into crowds. But those eyes held depths that made her reconsider everything about him. What's your name? Marcus Cole. How long have you worked here, Mr. Cole? 8 months, give or take. 8 months. Right around the time her father's health had started declining. Right when things at Hartwell Defense had begun to feel off in ways she could not quite articulate. Nothing she could point to directly, just a sense that pieces were moving on a board she could not see. Elena made a decision that would have seemed insane if examined too closely. But desperation did strange things to risk assessment, and she was running out of time. I have a problem. Most people do. I need to get married in 3 weeks, and I don't have time to find someone I can trust not to destroy my life in the process. Marcus Cole went very still. The cloth in his hand stopped moving. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral, giving away nothing. That's an unusual problem. I have an unusual life. Elena stood, moved closer. Power dynamics mattered, and she needed to see his face clearly to read his reaction to what she was about to propose. My father's will requires marriage before I turn 46, which happens in exactly 22 days. If I'm not married by then, I lose controlling interest in this company to a board of vultures who will tear it apart for spare parts. She watched for his reaction. Most men would have shown surprise, calculation, greed. The opportunity to marry a billionaire did not come along every day. Even with a prenuptial agreement limiting his take, there was leverage to be gained, influence to be acquired. Marcus Cole showed none of those things. He simply processed, like someone running tactical assessments, evaluating options, calculating outcomes. And you're proposing what exactly what I said. Courthouse wedding, prenuptial agreement. We live separately within the same residence. We see each other at carefully staged public events. After a reasonable interval, say 2 years, we divorce quietly. You walk away with a settlement large enough to disappear permanently if that's what you want. Why me? Because everyone else I could ask would want something I'm not willing to give. Power, position, access. You just want to be left alone. Elena met his eyes directly, betting everything on the instinct that had served her well through 3 decades of business negotiations. That makes you perfect. Marcus was silent for a long moment. His gaze flicked to something on his cleaning cart just a fraction of a second, but Elena caught it. When he looked back, something in his eyes had changed. Not softened exactly, but shifted into a different configuration of calculation and weariness. One condition. Name it. I have a granddaughter, Sophie. She's 6 years old. Her father, my son Tommy, died in Afghanistan in 2019. Her mother couldn't handle the grief, left 3 weeks after the funeral. His voice roughened on those words, the first crack in his careful neutrality. I've been raising Sophie since then. As far as she's concerned, this has to be real. I won't lie to my granddaughter about why I'm marrying someone, and if anything threatens her anything at all, the deal's off. I don't care about your company or your inheritance. She comes first. Elena felt something unexpected stir in her chest. Not quite respect, not quite sympathy. Something closer to recognition. A parent, a grandparent protecting their child in a world that did not make protection easy. She understood that impulse even if she had never had children of her own. I wouldn't expect anything less. She extended her hand across the space between them, closing the distance that separated CEO from custodian, billionaire from blue-collar worker. A business deal, nothing more. Marcus looked at her hand for a moment, then took it. His grip was firm, controlled, and carried faint calluses that had nothing to do with pushing brooms or emptying trash bins. We have a deal, Ms. Hartwell. Mrs. Cole, technically, as of 3 weeks from now. Neither of them smiled. There was nothing happy about the arrangement they had just made. Just 2 people trapped by circumstances making the best of impossible choices. Elena had no way of knowing in that moment that she had just shaken hands with one of the most dangerous men America had ever produced. A ghost who had spent 28 years hunting enemies in places that did not exist on any map, executing missions that would never be acknowledged, and building a body count that would have kept her awake at night if she had known the numbers. All she knew was that she had found someone to marry who wanted nothing from her except to be left alone. It seemed at the time like the perfect solution. The wedding was 8 minutes of bureaucracy. Manhattan Courthouse, Thursday afternoon. A judge who performed 50 ceremonies a week and had stopped seeing the people in front of her decades ago. 2 witnesses pulled from the hallway, paralegal students who earned $50 each for their signatures. Elena wore a gray Armani suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Marcus wore a black suit that fit him surprisingly well, despite looking inexpensive, tailored to his lean frame, in ways that suggested he knew how to dress when the occasion demanded. They repeated words written by strangers, signed papers that transformed their arrangement into legal reality, accepted a certificate that proved nothing about who they were or what they meant to each other. No kiss. Just a firm handshake that felt more like closing a business transaction than beginning a marriage. The prenuptial agreement had taken longer than the ceremony. 47 pages detailing exactly how little Marcus would receive in the event of divorce, exactly how much access he would have to company information, exactly what rights he surrendered by signing his name to Elena's life. He read every page. Signed without negotiation. His granddaughter was not mentioned in the paperwork. That had been Elena's call. Whatever happened between them, Sophie stayed protected, kept separate from the corporate warfare that defined her world. 3 months later, the arrangement had settled into routine. The penthouse at Columbus Circle offered 4,500 square feet of careful separation. Marcus and Sophie occupied the West Wing, 3 bedrooms and a bathroom, and enough space to maintain their own rhythm. Elena kept the master suite and home office in the East. They crossed paths 2 or 3 times weekly, usually in the kitchen or elevator. Polite, distant, exactly as agreed, except for the reading. It started in week 6. Elena worked late as usual, returning home after 11 to find Sophie crying in the living room. Marcus was stuck at work, whatever that actually meant during the hours he was not pushing a cleaning cart through Hartwell Defense. Patricia Walsh, the 68-year-old neighbor from the 32nd floor, had been babysitting. She looked frazzled, exhausted, clearly out of her depth with a distraught child. Elena had no experience with children. Her own mother had died when she was 15, and her father had raised her the way he ran his company, with efficiency and high expectations and very little warmth. She did not know how to comfort a crying 6-year-old, did not know what to say or do or offer. But Sophie was crying, and Elena, despite everything, could not simply walk away. She found herself in Sophie's room with a book about wild things and a small girl who looked at her like she had hung the moon just for showing up. The reading became ritual after that. Most nights Elena made it home by 7:30, and Sophie would appear in the living room with whatever story had captured her imagination that week. The child had her father's eyes. Elena learned the same gray as Marcus, but lighter hair blonde, where Marcus's was pepper shot with silver. She was smart in ways that sometimes startled Elena, asking questions about stars and oceans and why people had to die that had no easy answers. Sophie called her the princess who runs the tall building for the first month. Then one night, unprompted, she asked if she could call her something else. Like what? Elena had been genuinely curious. Maybe E like a superhero. The nickname stuck. And then a week later, Sophie had tried out Mama E with the kind of tentative hope that could break hearts made of stone. Elena had not corrected her. Now, 3 months into the arrangement, she sat at the kitchen island watching Marcus repair the penthouse's reverse osmosis water filtration system. He had disassembled the entire unit, cleaned each component with methodical precision, and was reassembling everything with the efficiency of someone who understood mechanical systems far beyond what a maintenance worker should know. His movements were practiced automatic. The work of someone who had fixed things his entire life, who found comfort in problems that had solutions in broken objects that could be made whole again. You're very good at that. Marcus glanced up from threading the last connection. His hands were clean despite the work. He had washed them twice during the process, each time with the thoroughness of someone trained to leave no traces. Used to do a lot of different things before cleaning offices. Such as nothing interesting. The deflection was smooth practiced. He stood tested. The water flow nodded with satisfaction. But it pays to be versatile. Elena wanted to push. Wanted to demand real answers about who Marcus Cole actually was beneath the uniform and the evasions, but their agreement did not include interrogation rights. They were business partners wearing wedding rings, nothing more, except that Sophie called her Mama E now. And Marcus had started leaving coffee ready in the mornings exactly how she liked it. Details he should not know, could not know, unless he had been paying attention in ways their arrangement did not require. Small things. Meaningless things. things that somehow felt like they mattered more than the signatures on their marriage certificate. Sophie appeared in the kitchen doorway, clutching a piece of paper covered in crayon drawings. "Mama, look what I made." Elena felt her heart clench at the casual use of the name that had somehow become hers. "Let me see, sweetheart." Sophie climbed onto the stool beside her, spreading the paper across the island's marble surface. The drawing showed a house rendered in the bright primary colors of childhood imagination. Inside the house were 3 figures, one tall with dark hair, one shorter with yellow hair, and one very small in the middle. "That's Grandpa," Sophie explained, pointing to the tall figure. "That's you, and that's me." "It's beautiful." Elena traced the crude lines with her finger. "But why am I standing so far away from you and Grandpa?" Sophie tilted her head, considering the question with the gravity of a philosopher contemplating existence. "Because you're always at work. But I'm drawing another one where you're closer." The words hit harder than Elena expected. She glanced at Marcus, who was watching the exchange with an expression she could not read. Something soft flickered in his gray eyes there and gone before she could identify it. "I'd like to see that one," Elena said softly. "When you finish it." "Okay." Sophie bounced off the stool and disappeared toward her room, leaving the adults in a silence that felt heavier than before. Marcus dried his hands on a towel, taking his time with each finger. "She doesn't understand the arrangement. To her, you're just—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Family." "And you? What do I am to you?" The question surprised both of them. Elena had not meant to ask, it had not even realized she was thinking it, until the words escaped. Marcus met her eyes across the kitchen island. "Complicated." It was not an answer, but it was honest in a way that felt more real than anything else between them. Later that week, the private investigator's report arrived on Walter Kensington's desk. 15 pages of careful documentation that concluded with a single damning paragraph. Marcus Cole's history existed for exactly 10 months and 12 days. Before that, nothing. No driver's license, no bank accounts, no tax records, no Social Security contributions, no utility bills, no credit history. As if he had been created from thin air, a man with no past and no connections appearing in Manhattan just in time to take a maintenance job at Hartwell Defense. Walter read the report twice. Then he made a phone call that would set events in motion neither he nor Elena could have anticipated. Elena read the same report 3 days later after her own security team intercepted a copy. She sat alone in her office at midnight, the pages spread across her desk, the implications settling into her bones like winter cold. The man she had married did not exist. Or rather, the man she had married existed only as a carefully constructed fiction, a legend in intelligence parlance, the false identity of someone who did not want to be found. She should have been afraid. Should have called security, called the police, called anyone who could protect her from the stranger living in her home. Instead, she thought about Sophie's drawings, about coffee made exactly the way she liked it, about the way Marcus positioned himself between her and doors, between her and windows, between her and any potential threat without ever seeming to think about it. Whatever Marcus Cole was hiding, whoever he had been before becoming a janitor who married CEOs for inheritance clauses, one thing had become clear over 3 months of careful observation. He was not a threat to her. If anything, she was starting to suspect he might be the only person in her life she could actually trust. That thought should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like relief. The security breach came on a Tuesday. Elena was reviewing Malaysian facility contracts when her phone lit up with James Reeves's name. The head of security was a former NYPD detective, 48 years old, solid and competent. He never called after 11 unless something had gone catastrophically wrong. "We have a situation." His voice carried the kind of controlled tension that made Elena's pulse spike. "Someone accessed Shadow Archive, encrypted files we didn't even know existed. The access codes were current. But my father's been dead 6 months, which means someone either copied his codes or has been sitting on them waiting for the right moment." Elena was already moving, grabbing her jacket, heading for the private elevator. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Lock down the system. No one in or out of those files until I arrive." She paused at the elevator doors. "And James, don't trust anyone." This came from inside. The penthouse was dark except for the kitchen light. Marcus sat at the island reading something on an ancient Nokia flip phone that probably could not access the internet if it tried. Not a smartphone she had noticed weeks ago. An old model, the kind that only made calls and sent texts. The kind that could not be easily tracked or hacked. He looked up as she entered, and something in her expression must have telegraphed urgency. Problem at work. Security breach. Someone accessed classified files. She should have stopped there. Should have kept her business separate from their arrangement, maintained the distance they had carefully constructed. But there was something about the way Marcus watched her. Alert. Assessing. Ready. "You know about the Malaysia operations. You know about the Southeast Asian projections. You know things a maintenance worker shouldn't know." "Yes." No denial. No deflection. Just acknowledgement. "What did you do before this? Before cleaning offices and marrying CEOs for inheritance clauses?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried weight, the heaviness of truths he could not fully share. Different things. For different reasons that seemed right at the time. "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It's not. But it's all I can give you right now." Elena studied him. This man she had married. This stranger who lived in her home and read stories to her granddaughter by marriage and knew classified information he should not possess. Every instinct screamed that Marcus Cole was hiding something massive, but those same instincts also insisted he was not the one who had breached her company's security. "I have to go to the office. Someone just accessed my father's encrypted files." Something shifted in Marcus's posture. Not obvious, but she had learned to read his micro-expressions over 3 months of proximity. The slight tightening around his eyes. The way his weight redistributed almost imperceptibly. The coiling of muscles preparing for action. "Let me come with you." Why? Because someone who knows enough to access files that well hidden knows things they shouldn't. And people with that kind of knowledge tend to be dangerous when cornered. The statement was too specific, too tactical. Normal civilians did not think in terms of exposure risk and cornered threats. But Elena was already moving toward the elevator, and having Marcus along suddenly felt less like weakness and more like strategy. "Fine, but stay out of the way." His mouth quirked. Not quite a smile, but close. "I'm good at staying out of the way." The lie was smooth enough that Elena almost believed it. Hartwell Defense Tower at midnight felt like a mausoleum. The lobby's usual bustle had been replaced by skeletal security and the hollow echo of their footsteps on marble floors. Emergency lighting cast everything in shades of institutional gray, turning familiar spaces into something out of a fever dream. James Reeves met them at the executive elevator, his expression tight with stress. Ms. Hartwell. His gaze flicked to Marcus with visible confusion. Mr. Cole. Update. Elena kept moving toward the elevator, forcing James to follow. Terminal 47B sub-basement maintenance area. Access originated at 9:47 p.m. Someone used a keycard registered to Thomas Walsh. Thomas Walsh died 3 months ago. Yes, ma'am. Whoever used his credentials sat at the terminal for exactly 18 minutes, then disappeared. James pulled out a tablet as they entered the elevator. The footage showed a figure in gray maintenance coveralls, face carefully angled away from camera's movements, suggesting familiarity with security coverage. Professional-grade tradecraft. Elena felt Marcus lean closer, his focus sharpening on the screen. When he spoke, his voice carried a different quality. Analytical, clinical. That's not Hunt and Peck typing. That's someone with serious technical training. And they never looked up, never checked for cameras. They already knew where the blind spots were. James stared at him. Mr. Cole used to work different jobs before maintenance. Elena kept her expression neutral. What files were accessed? Something called Project Valkyrie, and a directory labeled Client Network. Both are encrypted separately from the main archive. Whoever broke in knew exactly what they were looking for. Marcus went absolutely still, not the relaxed stillness of before. Combat ready. His hand moved toward something at his back, a motion so automatic he probably was not even aware of it. Then he caught himself, forced his arm back down, but not before Elena noticed. What do you know about Valkyrie? The question came out sharper than she intended. Marcus met her eyes. For the first time since their wedding, Elena saw something behind the careful mask. Fear, recognition. The expression of a man confronting ghosts he had hoped would stay buried. If that's what I think it is, we're in a lot more trouble than a security breach. The elevator doors opened onto the 14th floor, where server rooms hummed behind reinforced doors. Dr. Nathan Cross waited in the primary server room, looking like he had not slept in 3 days. The 57-year-old MIT PhD specialized in cryptography and wore his exhaustion like a badge of honor. His eyes were red-rimmed behind wire-frame glasses. "Show me." Elena did not waste time on pleasantries. Cross pulled up access logs on a secondary terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard with caffeinated precision. They hit something called Shadow Archive. Your father's personal files encrypted with military-grade algorithms I've never seen before. I didn't even know this directory existed until the access triggered our new security protocols. Can you open it? Eventually. But whoever designed this encryption knew what they were doing. It'll take days, maybe a week, to crack without the original keys. Marcus moved closer to the screen, studying the access patterns with an intensity that made Elena's instincts prickle. He was not just observing. He was analyzing, processing, running calculations that had nothing to do with cleaning supplies or building maintenance. What files did they access specifically? His question was direct, professional. The kind of question someone with operational experience would ask. Cross glanced at Elena, seeking permission. She nodded. Something called Project Valkyrie, and a directory labeled Client Network. Both are encrypted separately from the main archive. Whoever broke in knew exactly what they were looking for. The names meant nothing to Elena. Her father had run dozens of classified projects. Valkyrie could have been anything from satellite systems to drone guidance technology. but the way Marcus had gone absolutely still suggested it meant something to him, something he had been hoping never to hear again. James, I want full background checks on everyone with server room access, and I want this building locked down until we figure out how someone accessed my father's personal codes. She turned to Cross. How fast can you break that encryption? 72 hours if I work around the clock. Maybe faster if I can identify the algorithm's base architecture. Do it. Whatever you need, full authorization. Cross nodded and turned back to his screens, already lost in the mathematics of breaking military-grade encryption. Elena stood in the server room's antiseptic light and felt the weight of inherited secrets pressing down on her shoulders. Her father had always been paranoid, always compartmentalized information to an almost obsessive degree. She had assumed it was smart business practice in a competitive industry, but standing here at midnight looking at encrypted files she had never known existed, Elena started to wonder what Edward Hartwell had really been protecting, and whether his death 6 months ago had been as natural as the coroner's report claimed. The questions multiplied in her mind as she watched Marcus study the access logs with an intensity that suggested he was searching for something specific, something he expected to find. You know what Valkyrie is. Her voice was flat, not a question. I know what it might be. I hope I'm wrong. And if you're not. Marcus turned to face her fully, and in the server room's harsh fluorescent light, Elena saw past the careful disguise of the maintenance worker to something harder underneath. Something that had seen too much, done too much, and carried weights she could not begin to imagine. If I'm not wrong, then your father built something very dangerous, and the people who want it will kill anyone who gets in their way. He paused, his gray eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch, including you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications Elena was only beginning to understand. She had married a stranger to save her company. Now that stranger was telling her the company itself might be built on secrets worth killing for. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that Marcus Cole knew far more about those secrets than any janitor should. The game had changed. She just did not know yet how much. 3 days crawled past before Cross broke through the encryption. Elena spent 72 hours running Hartwell Defense by day, while privately investigating her own company by night. Every board member's history, every classified contract, every financial transaction that might explain who wanted access to her father's encrypted files badly enough to risk exposure. She found nothing. Or rather, she found too much. Connections that went nowhere. Payments that could be explained multiple ways. Relationships that might mean anything or nothing. Her father had built a labyrinth, and she was stuck trying to map it without a guide. Marcus vanished during those days. Not literally. He still came home, still read stories to Sophie, still maintained the careful domestic routine they had established. But there was a distance to him now, an abstraction, like part of his attention, had been pulled somewhere else entirely. Elena caught him twice with that ancient Nokia having conversations in low tones that stopped the moment she entered the room. She did not ask who he was talking to. Their arrangement did not include interrogation rights, but the not asking was starting to feel like willful blindness. Tuesday morning, Frank Delgado appeared at the corner coffee shop where Marcus had been taking his breakfast since starting at Hartwell Defense 10 months ago. The 62-year-old had a neatly trimmed gray beard and the straight-backed posture of someone who had never fully left the Marines even 35 years after his discharge. He moved with the careful economy of a man whose joints had started to complain, but whose discipline refused to accommodate them. Frank was one of 3 people still alive who knew who Marcus Cole really was. "You married the CEO." Frank settled into the booth across from Marcus, his coffee already ordered by the waitress who knew his habits. "That's one approach to gathering intelligence." The original mission was observation, determine if she was continuing her father's work. Marcus stared into his own cup, watching steam curl toward the ceiling. Things changed. Changed how? Changed in ways I didn't expect, didn't plan for. Frank studied his old friend with eyes that had seen too much to be easily fooled. "You're 54 years old, ghost. You've lost your wife, lost your son. You're raising your granddaughter alone. You've earned the right to want something real. But you're also investigating the company that might have killed Clara. If you let feelings cloud your judgment." "I know." Marcus's hand tightened around his coffee cup. "I know." They sat in silence for a moment. 2 old soldiers processing complications that had no clean solutions. "The breach," Frank finally said. "You think it's connected to Valkyrie. Someone accessed files that shouldn't exist using codes from a dead man. They knew exactly what they were looking for and exactly how to avoid detection." Marcus shook his head. "That's not corporate espionage. That's operational tradecraft. Which means someone else knows about Valkyrie. Someone who wants it badly enough to risk exposure. Or someone who wants to make sure it stays buried." Frank leaned back, his weathered face troubled. "What are you going to do? Find out what's in those files, then decide if the truth is worth whatever it costs to reveal it." "And the woman Elena." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "She's not her father. Whatever he built, whatever he did, she's trying to do better." He paused. "She reads to Sophie every night. Didn't have to. Wasn't part of our deal. But she does it anyway." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now." Sophie's new drawing appeared Thursday evening. Elena had come home early for once, escaping the office before 7 to find Sophie spread across the living room floor with crayons and paper scattered around her like autumn leaves. "I made something for you, Mama E." The name still caught Elena off guard every time. 3 months, and she had not grown used to the casual intimacy of it the way Sophie had simply decided she was family and refused to consider alternatives. The drawing showed the same 3 figures as before. One tall with dark hair going gray at the temples. One shorter with yellow hair. One small in the middle. But this time, the figure representing Elena stood closer to the others, almost touching. "Mama E is coming closer," Sophie explained with the gravity of a child who had thought deeply about the composition. "I can see it." "See what, sweetheart?" "You used to be far away. Now you're not." Elena traced the crayon lines with her finger, feeling something crack open in her chest that she had not known was sealed. "When did you become so wise?" Sophie shrugged, already reaching for another piece of paper. "Grandpa says people show you who they are by what they do, not what they say. You do nice things, so you're nice." Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, watching the exchange with an expression Elena could not read. Their eyes met across the room, and something unspoken passed between them. Acknowledgement, perhaps. Recognition that lines they had carefully drawn were beginning to blur. "Dinner's almost ready," he said quietly. "You cook now." Sophie doesn't like takeout every night. It was such a simple statement, such a domestic detail, the kind of thing that happened in normal families where people cared about each other's preferences and adjusted their behavior accordingly. Elena had never had that. Her father had worked through meals when he remembered to eat at all. After her mother died, dinner had become whatever the housekeeper left in the refrigerator, consumed alone in front of financial reports and strategic projections. This was different. This felt like something she had not known she was missing. Friday night, Cross called with exhausted triumph in his voice. "I'm in." Elena was at the office in 15 minutes. Marcus followed without being asked, and this time she did not question why. They had crossed some invisible threshold during the security breach. The pretense of separation no longer served whatever strange alliance they were building. Cross had transformed the server room into a makeshift command center. Multiple screens showed cascading data financial records, technical specifications for systems Elena did not recognize, and at the center of it all, a simple list of names that made her blood run cold. Project Valkyrie. Cross's voice shook slightly. "It's not a weapons system. It's a client list. Everyone your father sold Valkyrie technology to. Every organization using his systems right now. Every government official who took money to look the other way." Elena felt the floor shift beneath her feet. Not literally, but the sensation was real enough. The vertigo of discovering that everything she thought she knew was built on foundations of sand. "What exactly is Valkyrie?" Cross pulled up another screen, his face pale in the monitor's glow. "Autonomous surveillance and targeting system. Uses artificial intelligence to analyze data from cameras, phone metadata, social media, financial transactions. Identifies targets based on pattern analysis. Then generates elimination protocols designed to make deaths look natural." He paused, swallowing hard. "Heart attacks, car accidents, suicides, disease. It's been deployed in 17 countries. 847 operations logged over 6 years. At least 200 confirmed eliminations." The words hung in the antiseptic air. Elena tried to process what she was hearing. Her father had built an assassination machine, sold it to anyone willing to pay, created technology that could kill people while maintaining plausible deniability. She had known Edward Hartwell was complicated, had suspected his business practices skirted ethical lines, but this crossed from gray area into something actively evil. How damning is the client list? Pentagon officials, senators, foreign intelligence services, private military contractors operating in places the U.S. officially doesn't go. Cross rubbed his eyes beneath his glasses. If this goes public, it won't just destroy Hartwell Defense. It'll trigger investigations reaching into the highest levels of government. People will go to prison. Others will probably die trying to make sure that doesn't happen. Marcus moved closer to the screens, his attention fixed on something Elena could not identify. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, carrying an undercurrent of something that might have been recognition. "Pull up the elimination logs, the complete list." Cross glanced at Elena. She nodded. The screen filled with names, dates, locations. A catalog of death stretching back 6 years, each entry clinical and precise. Marcus scanned the list with growing intensity. Then he stopped. His whole body went rigid. Clara Cole. He read the name aloud, his voice flat as winter ice. Target number 847. Elimination date March 15th, 2018. Method vehicle accident. The room went silent. Elena watched Marcus watch the way all expression drained from his face, watched something cold and terrible settle into his eyes. "Your wife." The words came out before she could stop them. My wife. He turned to face her, and for the first time, Elena saw the man beneath all the careful disguises. Not a janitor, not a convenient husband. Something far more dangerous and far more broken. Valkyrie killed Clara because she was investigating it, because she was getting too close to the truth. Elena's father had murdered Marcus's wife. The man she had married for convenience was in her building in her life, in her home with her granddaughter, because he had been hunting the people responsible for destroying his family. And she was Edward Hartwell's daughter. We destroy it. The words came out flat, certain. All of it. The files, the client lists, the system. We shut down Valkyrie and make sure no one can ever use it again. No. Marcus's interruption was quiet but absolute. Excuse me. Destroying it accomplishes nothing except creating a power vacuum someone worse will fill. His gray eyes met hers, and Elena saw calculation beneath the grief. You need leverage. Use the client list to force shutdowns to negotiate reform instead of destruction. You sound like you've done this before. Yes. No elaboration, no explanation, just acknowledgement that landed like a confession. Elena understood what he was not saying. Marcus Cole had spent his life in the shadows, doing things that could not be discussed, making choices that could not be undone. He knew how power worked, how systems protected themselves, how to apply pressure to joints that would make the whole structure bend. What do you actually want? She asked the question that had been building for 3 months. Really? Not the arrangement, not the deal. What do you want? I want the truth about who ordered Clara's death. I want them to face consequences. He paused. And I want Sophie to grow up in a world where things like Valkyrie don't exist. That's not possible. You know that. Then I'll settle for a world where the people who use it are afraid, where they know exposure is possible, where they have to look over their shoulders every day for the rest of their lives. It was not justice. It was something darker, something that lived in the space between vengeance and despair. But Elena understood it. She had spent her whole life trying to earn her father's approval, trying to live up to his legacy, trying to prove she deserved the empire he had built. Now she was learning that empire was constructed on corpses, and the man she had married was one of its victims. Together then, she extended her hand, echoing the gesture from 3 months ago when this had all begun. We find out who's really behind Valkyrie. We expose them, and we burn down everything my father built that deserves to burn. Marcus looked at her hand, at her face, at something behind her eyes that she did not fully understand herself. You might not like what we find. Some truths can't be unfound. I've spent my entire life believing lies. I think I can handle the truth. He took her hand. His grip was different this time, warmer, more certain. Partners, then. Partners. Neither of them smiled. There was nothing happy about the alliance they were forming. Just two people who had lost too much found each other through circumstance and discovered they might be the only ones capable of understanding what the other needed. The phone rang at 2 a.m. Elena had fallen asleep at her desk, head pillowed on financial reports that no longer mattered. The sound jarred her awake heart, pounding hand reaching for the receiver before her mind fully engaged. An unfamiliar voice filled the line. Female, clipped, military. This is Colonel Diana Mercer. I believe we have matters to discuss. Elena's blood went cold. Who is this? Someone who's been trying to shut down Valkyrie for 5 years. Your father was my inside source, Mrs. Hartwell. He came to me in 2021, said he wanted out. Said the system had become everything he'd tried to prevent. The words did not compute. Her father working to destroy his own creation. We were building a case for congressional oversight when he died. Mercer's voice softened fractionally. His death wasn't an accident. The coroner was paid to miss the polonium traces in his coffee. Elena's legs gave out. She sank into her chair, the phone pressed to her ear, the room spinning around her. You're saying my father was murdered. I'm saying he was eliminated by the same system he created, because he was trying to expose it. Marcus appeared in the doorway, drawn by some instinct she did not understand. He saw her face and moved immediately to her side, close enough to hear the conversation. Who are you? Elena demanded. Really? I'm the one who sent Marcus Cole to watch you 10 months ago, to determine if you were continuing your father's criminal enterprise or trying to build something legitimate. Elena looked at Marcus. He had gone very still, his expression unreadable. The situation has escalated beyond surveillance, Mercer continued. I'm sending an extraction team. We need to discuss options somewhere secure. Why should I trust you? Because you don't have other choices. The people who killed your father know you have access to his files. They'll come for you. Soon. The only question is whether you're prepared when they arrive. The call ended. Elena stared at the phone in her hand, then at Marcus. You were sent to spy on me. Yes. From the beginning. Everything we've built. Everything Sophie. The mission stopped mattering months ago. He crouched beside her chair, putting himself at eye level. You matter. Sophie matters. Whatever happens next, I'm choosing you over orders. Elena wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that the man who read bedtime stories and fixed broken appliances and made coffee exactly the way she liked it was real, was genuine, was something more than a carefully constructed cover. But trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. Tell me everything. Now. Who you really are. What you really did. Why you're really here. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 28 years of secrets. My name is Marcus Cole. That part's true. But the man you married died officially 6 years ago after Clara's death. He paused. Before that, I was Delta Force, then CIA Special Activities Division, 28 years of service, more than 200 missions in places that don't exist on any map. Elena absorbed this. The man she had married was not a janitor, not a working-class widower making ends meet. He was a weapon honed by decades of training deployed against enemies of the state. How many people have you killed? The question should not have come so easily. Should not have sounded so clinical. I stopped counting after 100. By the time I got out, the number was well into triple digits. Elena did not recoil, did not gasp, did not show any reaction at all. Most of them deserved it, Marcus continued. Terrorists, arms dealers, men planning attacks on civilians, but some, he stopped, jaw tightening. Some were just inconvenient witnesses, analysts asking wrong questions, people in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Clara was a CIA analyst working the financial intelligence desk. We met at Langley in 2010, married a year later because we both understood. Classified lives don't wait for normal courtship. Tommy was from my first marriage, born in 1995, when I was still young enough to believe I could be both a soldier and a father. His mother left when he was 12, couldn't handle the deployments, the silence, the man I was becoming. Clara raised him as her own from the time he was 16. He stood moving to the window, his back to her. Clara died because she was mapping Valkyrie's financial network, tracing money to sources, identifying clients, building evidence. 3 days after she told me she'd found something big, her car hit a concrete barrier at 80 miles per hour on a straight road. And Tommy, Afghanistan, 2019, IED, random, meaningless. Just another soldier's death in a war that never should have happened. He turned back to face her. Sophie is all I have left. Everything I do, everything I've done since Clara died, is about making sure she grows up in a world that doesn't destroy her the way it destroyed everyone I loved. Elena rose from her chair, moved toward him, stopped when they were close enough to touch, but neither reached out. My mother died when I was 15. Cancer. Found too late because she was too busy supporting my father to take care of herself. The words came easier than expected. My father didn't cry at the funeral, just went back to work. Taught me that work was how you dealt with loss. And now I'm 45 years old, never married until you. No friends, no life outside this company. I became exactly what he wanted me to be. She met his eyes. And I'm learning everything he taught me was built on murder. Marcus reached out, touched her shoulder. The gesture was awkward, uncertain, like a man who had forgotten how to offer comfort. You're not him. What he built doesn't define you. Then what does? What you choose to do next. The words settled between them. Simple, true, carrying weight that neither fully understood. Elena made a decision. We go with Mercer's extraction. We find out who's really pulling strings. And then the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in 3 seconds later, bathing everything in red. James Reeves's voice crackled through the building intercom. Security breach. Armed intruders in the main lobby. All personnel shelter in place. The mask fell away in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The man who had learned to shrink himself to become furniture in rooms full of power straightened to his full height. Ghost woke up. He moved to the door, checking the hallway with professional efficiency, his whole body shifting into combat readiness. How many exits from this floor? 3. Main elevator, service stairs, executive, emergency lift. They'll cover the obvious routes. The service stairs might be clear if they're moving fast. He pulled something from his waistband, a compact pistol Elena had not known he was carrying. Stay behind me. Don't speak unless I ask you a question. If I tell you to run, you run. Don't look back. Sophie. Frank has her. I called him when the breach at the server room happened. She's safe. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to demand explanations. But Marcus was already moving, and the sound of gunfire was rising from floors below. They made it to the service stairs without encountering resistance. Marcus moved like water fluid and silent, checking corners and sightlines with the automation of long practice. Elena followed her designer heels, abandoned somewhere on the 47th floor, running in stocking feet through a building she had known her whole life that now felt like hostile territory. The first attacker appeared on the 44th floor landing. Elena never saw Marcus move. One moment the man was raising his weapon, the next he was on the ground with his neck bent at an angle that should not have been possible. Marcus collected the fallen rifle, checked the magazine, slung it over his shoulder without breaking stride. Keep moving. They encountered 2 more hostiles before reaching the parking garage. Both went down with the same brutal efficiency, Marcus engaging and neutralizing threats Before Elena fully registered they existed. The man she had married was a killer. Not metaphorically, not abstractly. A killer in the literal sense, someone who ended human lives with the casual competence of someone performing a well-practiced task. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something closer to relief. Because whatever was hunting them, Marcus knew how to hunt it back. 20 miles outside Manhattan, the SUV's engine coughed twice and died. Elena felt panic rise in her chest. They were exposed on a dark highway, enemies potentially minutes behind them, and their only transportation had just become a 2-ton paperweight. Marcus was out of the vehicle before she could speak. He popped the hood, produced a small flashlight from somewhere, and leaned into the engine compartment with the focused attention of a surgeon examining a patient. Fuel line's been cut. Partial slice designed to fail after sustained use. His voice carried no panic-only assessment. They tagged the car before we left the garage. Wanted us to break down somewhere isolated. Can you fix it? I can fix anything. He was already working hands moving with practiced efficiency. Electrical tape from the emergency kit. Temporary patch. It'll hold for 30 miles if we keep the speed under 50. Elena watched him work, watched the way his fingers found problems and solved them without hesitation. This was not combat training. This was something older, more fundamental. A man who had learned to survive by being useful, by knowing how things worked and how to make broken things whole again. 7 minutes later, the engine turned over. Where did you learn to do that? My father was a mechanic in El Paso. Spent my childhood under cars learning that every problem has a solution if you're willing to get your hands dirty. Marcus pulled back onto the highway, eyes scanning mirrors for pursuit. Fancy degrees tell you what should work. Dirty hands teach you what actually does. The safe house sat 10 miles further buried in Virginia suburbs that specialized in anonymity. A small colonial indistinguishable from 1,000 others on the same street lawn, neatly maintained American flag hanging from the porch. Inside was different. Reinforced doors, bulletproof windows, communication equipment that belonged in a military installation, and Sophie asleep on the couch with her teddy bear completely unaware of the violence that had erupted around her. Frank Delgado sat at the kitchen table cleaning a rifle with the practiced ease of someone who had done it 10,000 times before. She went down about an hour ago. Told her grandpa had work stuff and you'd pick her up in the morning. He looked up as Marcus and Elena entered. Saw the news. Hartwell buildings on lockdown. 6 casualties confirmed. Marcus moved to check the windows, scanning the street with professional paranoia. Mercer's extraction team. Never showed. Either they got intercepted or they were never coming. Elena sank into a chair, exhaustion and adrenaline warring in her system. The last few hours had shattered everything she thought she knew about her life, her father, her marriage. What happens now? Marcus turned from the window. Now we find out who sent those men, and why Mercer's team didn't show. The phone rang before anyone could respond. Marcus answered, listened for 30 seconds, then handed it to Elena without expression. Diana Mercer's voice came through clear and confident. Apologies for the confusion. My team encountered unexpected resistance, but we have a safe location prepared. I'll send coordinates. How do I know this isn't a trap? You don't. But your options are limited, and the people hunting you won't stop. I'm offering protection. I'm offering answers. The alternative is running blind until they catch you. Elena looked at Marcus. He gave a slight nod. Send the coordinates. They moved at dawn. Elena rode in the back seat of an armored SUV, Sophie drowsy against her shoulder, Marcus driving with Frank riding shotgun. The route took them south toward Washington through suburbs that looked peaceful but felt like enemy territory. She's different when she sleeps. Elena said it softly, not wanting to wake the child. Smaller, more vulnerable. She's 6. Everything's vulnerable at 6. Marcus's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the shared weight they were carrying the child who depended on them both for protection. I never wanted children, Elena continued. Told myself I was too busy, too focused on the company. The truth is, I was afraid. Of what? Becoming my father. Putting work above everything else. Missing recitals and birthdays and scraped knees because there was always something more important. She stroked Sophie's hair, feeling the silky strands beneath her fingers. 3 months ago, I married a stranger to save a company. Now that company might be destroyed by what my father built. And somehow, sitting here with your granddaughter asleep on my shoulder, that doesn't seem as important as it should. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Clara used to say that people reveal themselves through small choices. The big decisions come with pressure, with consequences. But the small ones... He paused. The small ones show who you really are when no one's watching. And what do my small choices show? That you're not your father. That you chose to read bedtime stories to a child you had no obligation to love. That you're here now protecting her instead of protecting your assets. Elena felt something shift in her chest. Something she had been keeping carefully sealed since her mother's death 30 years ago. I don't know how to do this, any of this. I don't know how to be a mother or a partner or whatever we're becoming. I only know how to work. Then we learn together, because I don't know how to do this either. Marcus met her eyes in the mirror again. I know how to kill people. I know how to infiltrate and extract and eliminate. I don't know how to be a husband or a grandfather or anything that doesn't involve violence. Frank snorted from the passenger seat. Listen to you two. Couple of broken weapons trying to learn how to be people. He shook his head. Maybe that's exactly what you both need. The safe house in Georgetown was larger than the Virginia location, a 3-story townhouse tucked into a row of identical buildings that screamed old money and government connections. Inside the decor was bland and institutional, the kind of anonymous comfort designed for people who were not supposed to be memorable. Rachel Torres met them at the door. 35 years old, red hair pulled back, severely body armor worn with the ease of someone who considered it normal clothing. She scanned the street before ushering them inside. Colonel Mercer's waiting upstairs. She apologizes for the extraction delay. The team encountered hostiles. What kind of hostiles? Marcus handed off his weapons for the security check. His eyes never stopping their assessment of the building's layout. Professional, well-equipped. They knew our roots. Rachel's expression darkened. We lost 2 operators. Elena followed them up the stairs, Sophie now awake and clinging to her hand. The child had accepted the explanation that they were on an adventure, but her eyes were too sharp, too knowing. She understood more than she let on. Diana Mercer waited in what had once been a formal dining room, now converted into a briefing space. 58 years old, steel gray hair, cut short eyes that had seen everything twice and believed in nothing. She wore civilian clothes but carried herself with unmistakable military bearing. Mrs. Hartwell, thank you for coming. Her attention shifted to Marcus. Ghost. It's been a long time. Not long enough. Mercer's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. Still angry about Brussels. You burned me, left me without extraction. Clara died 3 months later. Clara died because she was investigating Valkyrie. My failure to extract you didn't cause that. Your failure to extract me forced me underground, forced me to disappear, forced Clara to continue the investigation alone. Elena watched the exchange, reading the history between these two people in the tension of their bodies, the careful way they circled each other verbally. You two know each other. Diana was my handler for 6 years. Marcus's voice was flat. Until a mission in Brussels went wrong, and she decided I was more useful as a deniable asset than an acknowledged operator. That's not... You left me in a basement with 3 broken ribs and a Chechen kill team hunting me through the streets. Don't tell me what it was or wasn't. Mercer held up her hands. We have larger concerns than old grievances. The people who attacked Hartwell Tower tonight weren't random. They were sent by someone who knows about Valkyrie and wants to control what happens to it. Who? That's what we need to determine. Mercer moved to a screen mounted on the wall, pulling up images and documents. Your father built Valkyrie as a defensive system. Early warning for high-value assets, embassies, military installations. Somewhere along the way, clients started using it for offensive purposes. Political enemies, business competitors, inconvenient witnesses. She cycled through photographs, men in suits shaking hands, military officers at classified facilities, intelligence officials whose names never appeared in public records. The client list your father compiled represents the complete network. Every government official, every agency director, every private contractor who ever used Valkyrie for purposes it wasn't designed for. And you want that list? I want to use that list to force systematic shutdown, negotiate quiet exits for people willing to cooperate, prosecute those who resist. Elena stepped forward. That's not justice. That's damage control. Justice would require exposing everything. The investigations alone would destabilize multiple governments. Intelligence operations would be compromised. People who had nothing to do with Valkyrie's misuse would be destroyed. Mercer met her eyes. Sometimes damage control is the best outcome available. And my father. What about justice for his murder? Your father was killed by someone inside the network who decided he was more dangerous as a reformer than a founder. Find that person, and you find the key to everything else. Marcus had been silent through this exchange, studying Mercer with the intensity of someone reading a tactical map. You're not telling us something. Mercer paused. What makes you say that? Because I know you. You don't do anything without multiple objectives. You're offering help, offering information, but you haven't said what you want in return. The silence stretched. I want the kill switch, Mercer finally said. Edward built a failsafe into Valkyrie. A way to shut down the entire system, simultaneously corrupt all deployed units, make the technology unsalvageable. He told Elena the location before he died. Elena remembered her father's last phone call. The rambling, seemingly incoherent words she had attributed to cardiac medication. Numbers that made no sense repeated twice, insisted upon with desperate urgency. He called me the night before he died, gave me coordinates I didn't understand. Those coordinates lead to the kill switch location. Find it, activate it, and Valkyrie ceases to exist. No more assassinations. No more eliminations. No more algorithm deciding who lives and dies. And you couldn't find it yourself. I've been looking for 5 years. Edward trusted no one completely, not even me. But he trusted you enough to give you the key. Elena looked at Marcus. He gave a slight nod. We'll find the kill switch, but we do this together. No more secrets, no more hidden agendas. Agreed. The word came too easily. Elena did not believe it for a moment, but they had no other options. Sophie fell asleep during the briefing, curled in a chair with her teddy bear, exhausted by an adventure she did not fully understand. Elena carried her upstairs to one of the bedrooms, tucked her in with the careful attention of someone who had only recently learned how to perform this ritual. Marcus found her there 20 minutes later, standing in the doorway, watching the child sleep. Frank's going to stay with her. We need to talk. They walked to the back patio, away from listening ears and surveillance equipment. The Georgetown night was quiet, the sounds of the city muted by expensive real estate and careful urban planning. You don't trust Mercer. I don't trust anyone who burns their own operators. Marcus leaned against the railing, his face half shadowed in the porch light. Diana's smart, capable. She'll use us to get what she wants and discard us the moment we become inconvenient. Then why agree to work with her? Because she's right about one thing. The people hunting us won't stop. We need resources intelligence protection that we can't provide ourselves. He paused. And because somewhere in her operation is the person who killed Clara, the person who killed your father. I'll work with the devil himself if it means finding them. Elena moved to stand beside him. Tell me about Clara. Why? Because if we're going to do this together, I need to understand what drives you, what you're willing to sacrifice, what lines you won't cross. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring into the darkness. Clara was the best person I ever knew. Smart, funny, completely unimpressed by anything I had accomplished. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. We met at a briefing at Langley. She was presenting financial analysis I didn't understand, and I was supposed to be paying attention to tactical implications. Instead, I spent the whole meeting watching her talk. Love at first sight. Curiosity at first sight. Love came later, after I discovered she could drink me under the table and beat me at chess in 7 moves. He turned to face Elena. Tommy was an accident. We weren't planning, children weren't sure we wanted them. But Clara got pregnant and suddenly nothing else mattered. I took fewer missions, stayed home more, tried to be the father I never had. What happened? Tommy grew up, became a man, joined the army because he wanted to serve like his father, even though I begged him not to. Went to Afghanistan, called me every Sunday for 3 years. Marcus's voice roughened. The last time we talked, he told me he was proud to be my son. 3 days later, the notification team showed up at Clara's door. Elena reached out, touched his arm. The gesture was awkward, uncertain, but she could not simply stand there and offer nothing. Sophie was 18 months old when Tommy died. Her mother lasted 3 weeks before the grief broke her completely. Just walked out one morning and never came back. And you've been raising her alone. Clara and I took her in. Then Clara died and it was just me. He met Elena's eyes. Sophie is the only good thing left from everything I've built and destroyed. The only proof that any of it mattered. Elena understood. More than she should have, perhaps. The weight of legacy. The desperate need to believe that suffering had purpose. I'll protect her. The words came out before she could stop them. Whatever happens, whatever we find, Sophie comes first. You barely know her. I know she calls me Mama E. I know she draws pictures of our family. I know she's 6 years old and has already lost more than any child should. Elena stepped closer. I know that 3 months ago I married a stranger to save a company. And somehow that stranger and his granddaughter have become more important than anything I thought I was fighting for. Marcus looked at her, really looked past the CEO and the billionaire and the woman who had proposed a business arrangement in her office at midnight. This wasn't part of the plan. I know. I came here to investigate your father's company, to find out who killed Clara, not to... I know. She kissed him. Not the formal gesture they had avoided at their wedding, not the polite distance they had maintained for 3 months. Something real, something terrifying, something that acknowledged all the ways their careful arrangement had been destroyed by circumstances neither of them controlled. When they broke apart, Marcus's expression held something she had never seen before. Vulnerability, uncertainty, the look of a man who had spent decades building walls and was watching them crumble. This complicates everything. I know. If Mercer finds out, I don't care about Mercer. I care about Sophie. I care about finding out who killed our families. And apparently, Elena touched his face. I care about you. Marcus caught her hand, held it against his cheek. I haven't let myself care about anyone since Clara died. It was easier to be numb, safer. And now I'm standing on a porch in Georgetown with a woman I married for convenience. And all I can think about is how terrified I am of losing someone else. Then don't lose me. Simple words, impossible promises, but standing there in the Georgetown darkness with Sophie asleep upstairs and enemies circling and everything they thought they knew in ruins, it felt like enough. The morning brought new complications. Senator Margaret Chen arrived at 7 a.m. with a security detail and a folder full of documents. 60 years old, silver-haired, carrying herself with the authority of someone who had spent decades navigating Washington's treacherous currents. Mrs. Hartwell, I've read Colonel Mercer's brief. She settled into a chair accepting coffee from Rachel Torres. This is going to be ugly. Senators don't like investigating other senators. The Intelligence Committee especially doesn't appreciate civilian testimony about classified programs. I understand. I'm not sure you do. Chen's tone was gentle but firm. Some of these people have been in power longer than you've been alive. They have connections reaching into every agency, every court, every media organization. When you name them, you're not just making accusations. You're declaring war. Elena thought about her father, about Clara Cole, dead on a Brussels highway, about every person who had died because Valkyrie existed and powerful people decided elimination was easier than accountability. Then we make it a war they can't win. Chen smiled with grim satisfaction. Good, because half measures won't work here. We go all in, or we don't go at all. The briefing lasted 3 hours. Chen walked Elena through likely questions, teaching her how to present evidence without revealing sources and methods, how to answer hostile questions from senators who were either implicated or protecting colleagues. Marcus submitted to extensive debriefing with Mercer, providing operational details about Valkyrie deployments he had witnessed or participated in. His voice remained flat throughout, reciting coordinates and casualty counts with the detachment of someone reading weather reports. Elena listened from the next room, hearing the man she had married describe missions that sounded like fiction, but carried the terrible weight of truth. Kandahar, Mogadishu, Damascus suburbs, places where the rules of engagement blurred into moral gray zones and victory meant minimizing bodies instead of avoiding them entirely. Around 10 p.m., Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs, rubbing her eyes. "Mama E, I can't sleep. Too many new sounds." Elena climbed the stairs and settled on the edge of Sophie's temporary bed. "Do you want me to tell you a story? Will you tell me about the princess who runs the tall building? That princess is very tired tonight, but she's also very lucky. Why? Because she found a family she didn't know she was looking for." Sophie considered this with the gravity of a child contemplating important matters. "Grandpa says family is something you build, not something you're born into. Your grandpa is very wise. He also says you're pretty and smart, and that you make him smile." Elena felt warmth spread through her chest. "When did he say that?" "This morning, when he thought I was asleep." Sophie yawned. "I think he loves you, Mama E, and I think you love him too." Out of the mouths of babes, Elena thought, seeing what adults were too frightened to acknowledge. "Get some sleep, sweetheart. Tomorrow's going to be a big day. Will you be here when I wake up?" "I'll be here." Sophie's eyes drifted closed, her hand reaching out to grasp Elena's. "Promise. I promise." Elena sat there long after the child fell asleep, watching her breathe, feeling the small fingers wrapped around her own. 3 months ago, she had married a stranger to save a company. Now she was sitting vigil over his granddaughter, making promises she was not sure she could keep falling in love with a family she had never expected to find. The world outside was full of enemies, politicians protecting their secrets, intelligence operatives covering their tracks, an assassination network that had killed her father and would certainly try to kill her. But in this room, in this moment, none of that mattered. Only Sophie, only Marcus, only the strange, unexpected, terrifying family they were building together. When Elena finally returned downstairs, Marcus was waiting in the kitchen. "She's asleep. Finally. She asked me to promise I'd be there when she wakes up." "And I promised." Marcus moved closer. "Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever we find, Sophie stays protected. That's non-negotiable." "Agreed." They stood in the kitchen of a Georgetown safe house surrounded by intelligence operatives and government officials and the machinery of power they were about to challenge. Everything they had built was at risk. Everything they thought they knew was about to be tested. But standing there together, Elena felt something she had not experienced in 30 years. Hope. The door opened behind them. Mercer stood in the entrance, her expression grave. "We have a problem. The team I sent to secure the server room found additional files. Someone accessed Valkyrie's core architecture an hour ago." "Who?" "That's what concerns me." Mercer pulled up images on her tablet. Security footage showing a figure in dark clothing face obscured moving through Hartwell Defense with obvious familiarity. Whoever this is, they knew exactly where to go and exactly what to look for. They have inside access. Marcus studied the footage. The way they move. Professional. Trained. There's more. Mercer swiped to another image. They left a message. "On your father's personal terminal." The screen showed a simple text file, white text on black background. "You have 48 hours to deliver the kill switch location." After that, we start with the child. Elena's blood turned to ice. Sophie. Someone knew about Sophie. Someone was threatening to hurt a 6-year-old girl to force their compliance. Marcus's expression went absolutely flat. Every trace of the man who had kissed her on the porch disappeared, replaced by something cold and lethal. Find out who sent this. His voice carried a quality Elena had never heard before. Find out where they are, and then stay out of my way. The war had just become personal, and Marcus Cole was about to remind everyone exactly why they had called him Ghost. The threat changed everything. Elena watched something ancient rise behind his eyes in the hours following the message. Not transformation this time. Reversion. The soldier he had buried was clawing its way back to the surface, and with it, the careful husband disappeared. The patient grandfather vanished. What remained was something older, harder, forged in decades of violence that she was only beginning to understand. He moved through the Georgetown safe house with predatory efficiency, checking weapons, reviewing security protocols, making calls on the ancient Nokia to people whose names he never spoke aloud. Frank Delgado shadowed him, the two old soldiers communicating in glances and gestures that excluded everyone else. Sophie slept upstairs, unaware that her existence had become a bargaining chip in a war she could not comprehend. We need to move her. Marcus spread maps across the kitchen table, marking locations with a red pen. Somewhere off-grid. Somewhere they can't find. Where? Elena stood beside him, forcing herself to focus on logistics rather than fear. They found us here. They found us at Hartwell Tower. They know our resources, our patterns. Then we break the patterns. Mercer entered the kitchen, her face grave. My tech team traced the intrusion. The message originated from inside Hartwell Defense. Someone with executive-level access. The board. Elena felt cold certainty settle in her stomach. Walter Kensington, Richard Dawes. One of them has been feeding information since the beginning. Or all of them. Marcus did not look up from his maps. Your father trusted compartmentalization. Different people knowing different pieces. But someone put those pieces together. There's more. Mercer pulled up files on her tablet. We found additional communications in the Shadow Archive. Encrypted messages between your father and someone using the codename Architect. They go back 7 years. What do they say? Arguments. Your father wanted to shut Valkyrie down. The Architect wanted to expand it. The last message was sent 3 days before your father died. Elena took the tablet, scrolling through the communications. Her father's words jumped out at her, passionate and desperate in ways she had never seen from him in life. This has gone too far. People are dying who shouldn't die. I built Valkyrie to protect, not to murder. The response was cold, clinical. You built a tool. Tools don't have morality. Only users do. And the users have decided Valkyrie is too valuable to destroy. If you move forward with your plan, you'll be treated as any other threat to operational security. Her father's final message broke her heart. I'd rather die than continue this. My daughter will never know what I built. She'll inherit a company, not a murder machine. I'm activating the kill switch. He had tried to protect her, had tried to destroy his own creation rather than let her discover the truth, and someone had killed him for it. The Architect. Elena's voice was steady, despite the grief tearing through her. That's who we need to find. The communications were routed through 17 different proxy servers. Mercer shook her head. Whoever this is, they know how to hide. Marcus finally looked up from his maps. They're not hiding anymore. They sent a direct threat. They want the kill switch badly enough to expose themselves, which means they're desperate or confident. His gray eyes met Elena's. Either way, we use it against them. The plan came together over the next 6 hours. Sophie would be moved to a secondary safe house in rural Virginia, accompanied by Frank and a security team Rachel Torres assembled from operators she trusted personally. The location was known only to the 4 people in the kitchen, communicated verbally to avoid any electronic trail. Marcus and Elena would return to Manhattan, to Hartwell Defense, to the coordinates her father had given her in his final phone call. The kill switch is in the building. Elena had finally decoded the numbers, matching them to a sub-level that did not appear on any official blueprints. Sub-Basement 5, a section my father had built during the Cold War renovations. A bunker, Marcus nodded. Paranoid old-school tradecraft. Build your escape route before you need it. If the architect wants the kill switch, we give them a reason to come get it. Mercer raised an eyebrow. You're proposing to use yourself as bait. I'm proposing to end this. Whoever the architect is, they've been operating in shadows for 7 years. Time to drag them into the light. The argument that followed was fierce, but brief. Marcus opposed the plan on principle, unwilling to risk Elena in a confrontation they could not fully control. Elena countered that she was already at risk, that the threat against Sophie proved their enemies would strike regardless of precautions. We can run forever, or we can fight once. She held his gaze. I choose to fight. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Together then, we go in together, or we don't go at all. Together. The word carried weight beyond tactics. A commitment that had nothing to do with military operations and everything to do with the impossible relationship they had built from a business arrangement. Sophie woke at dawn, confused by the activity around her. Are we going on another adventure, Grandpa? Marcus knelt beside her, his hard edges softening in the presence of the child who had become the center of his world. You're going to stay with Frank for a little while. Just a few days. Why can't I stay with you and Mama E? Because Mama E and I have some grown-up work to do. Important work. But when it's done, we'll all be together again. Sophie's eyes, gray like her grandfather's, searched his face with uncomfortable perception. Is it dangerous? Marcus hesitated. He had never lied to his granddaughter, had always believed children deserved truth, even when it was difficult. Yes, but I've done dangerous things before, and I always came back. Promise. I promise I will do everything possible to come back to you. It was not a lie. It was not a guarantee. It was the most honest thing he could offer. Sophie hugged him fiercely, her small arms tight around his neck. I love you, Grandpa. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything in the world. Elena watched the exchange from the doorway, her heart aching with emotions she had not known she was capable of feeling. 3 months ago, she had been a CEO focused on quarterly projections and board meetings. Now she was watching a man she had accidentally fallen in love with say goodbye to a child who called her Mama E. Sophie released Marcus and turned to Elena. You'll take care of him right. Make sure he doesn't do anything too brave. Elena knelt to meet the child's eyes. I'll take care of him, and he'll take care of me. That's what family does. Good. Sophie nodded with 6-year-old solemnity. Because I want you both to come back. I'm not done building our family yet. The words hit harder than any threat, any weapon, any enemy they were about to face. Elena hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo and innocence. We'll come back, I promise. It was a promise she had no right to make, a promise that depended on factors beyond her control. But looking into Sophie's trusting eyes, Elena knew she would do whatever it took to keep it. The convoy left at 7 a.m. Frank drove the lead vehicle with Sophie secured in the back seat, surrounded by operators who would die before letting harm reach her. Rachel Torres commanded the security detail, her red hair pulled back tight, her expression professional, but carrying an undertone of personal investment that Elena did not fully understand. Marcus watched until the vehicles disappeared around a corner, his face unreadable. She'll be safe. Elena touched his arm. Frank won't let anything happen to her. Frank would die for her. That's what concerns me. He turned from the window. Too many people have died for things I care about. Then let's make sure no one else has to. Hartwell Defense Tower rose against the Manhattan skyline like a monument to power and secrets. Elena had spent her entire adult life in this building, climbing its ranks, learning its systems, preparing to inherit the empire her father had built. Now she understood that empire was constructed on corpses. They entered through the executive parking garage, avoiding the main lobby where security cameras would record their arrival. The building was quiet on a Sunday morning, skeleton staff manning essential systems, most offices dark and empty. The elevator to Sub-Basement 5 required codes that Elena had found in her father's encrypted files. The doors opened onto a corridor she had never seen, concrete walls and fluorescent lighting that belonged in a military installation rather than a corporate headquarters. He really was paranoid. Elena ran her hand along the rough surface. All these years, and I never knew this existed. Men with secrets build places to keep them. Marcus moved ahead, clearing corners with professional efficiency. Your father had more secrets than most. The kill switch room was at the corridor's end behind a steel door that required both biometric and code authentication. Elena pressed her palm to the scanner, held her eye to the retinal reader, entered the 16-digit sequence from her father's final phone call. The door clicked open. Inside was a single terminal in a sterile white room. No windows, no other exits. Just a computer screen displaying a simple interface, Project Valkyrie. Termination protocol authorization required to proceed. This is it. Elena approached the terminal. One command and Valkyrie ceases to exist. Don't touch it yet. Marcus's voice carried warning. He was studying the room with an intensity that suggested he saw things she had missed. What's wrong? The dust patterns. Someone's been here recently, within the last few days. Elena looked closer. The floor showed faint disturbances footprints that had been partially concealed but not completely erased. The architect. They already know this location. They've been here, studied the system. Marcus moved to examine the terminal's housing. They didn't activate the kill switch because they can't. Your father locked it to your biometrics specifically. So they need me. They need you alive and cooperative, which means the threat against Sophie was about leverage, not elimination. The realization shifted something in Elena's understanding. Their enemies were not trying to kill her. They were trying to control her. To force her to either hand over the kill switch or use it under their direction. We wait then. Let them come to us. No. Marcus straightened from his examination. We make them think we're activating the switch. Force them to reveal themselves before they're ready. How? Mercer has contacts in every intelligence agency. If we feed information through the right channels, word will reach the architect within hours. They'll have to act. Elena considered the risks, exposing their location, their intentions, their vulnerability, inviting confrontation with enemies who had successfully hidden for 7 years. "Do it," Marcus made the call. The wait was 3 hours and 17 minutes. Elena spent the time exploring the bunker her father had built, finding storage rooms filled with documents and hardware that told the story of Valkyrie's evolution. Progress reports, technical specifications, casualty assessments written in clinical language that disguised murder as operational efficiency. Her father's handwriting appeared on many of the documents, notes and margins, questions, increasingly urgent objections as the system was transformed from defensive tool to assassination platform. He had not known. Not at first. He had built something he believed would protect people and watched helplessly as others corrupted it beyond recognition. The final documents showed his attempts to fight back. Proposals for congressional oversight that were rejected, requests for operational restrictions that were ignored. Ultimately, the construction of this very room, the kill switch that represented his last hope of destroying what he had created. He had died trying to do the right thing. That knowledge did not absolve him, did not erase the hundreds of deaths that Valkyrie had caused, but it changed something in Elena's understanding of the father she had spent her life trying to impress. He had been human, flawed, capable of terrible mistakes and genuine remorse, just like everyone else. Marcus found her in the document room, surrounded by paper ghosts. "They're coming." Mercer's sources confirm movement. Multiple vehicles heading toward Manhattan. "How long?" "An hour, maybe less." Elena stood brushing dust from her clothes. "Then we prepare." The preparation was methodical. Marcus positioned himself at the corridor entrance, armed with weapons he had retrieved from Mercer's cache. Elena remained in the kill switch room, her hand poised over the terminal, ready to activate the moment their enemies revealed themselves. "Whatever happens," Marcus said through the communication device in her ear, "don't hesitate. If I tell you to activate, you activate. Don't wait for confirmation. And if you can't tell me, then use your judgment. You'll know when it's time." 47 minutes later, the elevator doors opened. Diana Mercer stepped into the corridor, flanked by operators in tactical gear. She moved with unhurried confidence, as if arriving for a scheduled meeting rather than a confrontation. "Mrs. Hartwell." "Marcus." Her voice echoed off concrete walls. "I was hoping we could discuss this like professionals." Elena's blood turned to ice. Mercer, the woman who had sent Marcus to investigate Hartwell defense, the woman who had offered protection and information, the woman who had been orchestrating events from the beginning. "You're the architect." "I'm practical." Mercer spread her hands. "Your father built something extraordinary. I simply ensured it reached its full potential." Marcus emerged from his position weapon, trained on Mercer's chest. "You killed Clara." Clara was investigating financial irregularities that would have exposed the entire network, a regrettable necessity. Mercer's expression showed no remorse. "She was a good analyst, thorough. That's precisely why she had to be eliminated." "And Edward Hartwell." "Edward lost his nerve, wanted to destroy everything we'd built because a few assets were deemed acceptable losses." She shook her head. "A weapon system that has prevented 17 major terrorist attacks, eliminated 43 high-value targets who would have destabilized entire regions, and he wanted to shut it down because of collateral damage." Elena found her voice. "You poisoned my father." "I removed a threat to operational security. the same way Valkyrie removes all threats, efficiently, cleanly, without emotion clouding judgment. The operators fanned out behind Mercer, establishing firing positions that covered both Marcus and the kill switch room. Professional, disciplined, clearly accustomed to violence. You have two choices. Mercer's tone remained conversational. Hand over control of the kill switch and we disappear. You continue running Hartwell Defense. Sophie grows up safe and happy. Everyone goes back to their lives. Or we take control by force. You die. Marcus dies. And Sophie spends the rest of her childhood wondering why the people she loved abandoned her. Marcus did not lower his weapon. You're forgetting something. What's that? I've killed better operators than the ones you brought, and I'm highly motivated. Mercer smiled coldly. You're 54 years old, Marcus. Out of the field for 6 years. Do you really think you can take all of us? Skills don't need degrees to prove themselves. They prove themselves in fire. Marcus's voice was quiet, certain. And I've walked through more fire than your entire team combined. The first shot came from somewhere behind Mercer's formation. One of her operators dropped, clutching his leg. Then another fell a clean hit to the shoulder that spun him into the wall. Rachel Torres emerged from a service corridor, her weapon steady, her expression set. Sorry, Colonel, but threatening children crosses a line I won't follow. Mercer's eyes widened with genuine surprise. Torres, you were loyal for 12 years. I was loyal to the mission, protecting national security, eliminating genuine threats. Rachel's voice was steady, but Elena could see something broken behind her eyes. My sister's daughter is 8 years old. When I heard you threaten Sophie, I saw her face, saw what we've become. Sentiment makes you weak. Sentiment makes me human. Something you forgot how to be a long time ago, Diana. Chaos erupted. Marcus moved with the fluid violence Elena had witnessed at Hartwell Tower, closing distance on operators before they could react. His combat was brutal and efficient strikes designed to incapacitate rather than kill when possible, lethal force applied without hesitation when necessary. Mercer drew her sidearm, but Rachel was faster. A shot through the colonel's gun hand sent the weapon clattering across concrete. It's over, Diana. It's never over. Mercer's voice remained calm despite the blood streaming from her hand. Valkyrie is bigger than any of us. Shut it down, and someone else will rebuild it. The demand exists. The technology exists. You're fighting the tide. Elena stepped out of the kill switch room. Maybe, but the tide starts receding today. She turned to the terminal input, her biometric authorization, and prepared to execute the command that would destroy her father's creation. Wait. Marcus's voice stopped her. He stood over Mercer, his weapon pressed to her temple, his face a mask of cold fury. She killed Clara. She killed your father. She's threatened Sophie. His finger tightened on the trigger. Give me one reason not to end this permanently. Elena crossed the distance between them, placing her hand on his arm. Sophie. The single word cut through his rage. Sophie needs you to come back to her, not as the man who executed someone in a basement, but as the grandfather who reads her stories and teaches her that people can be better than their worst impulses. Marcus's jaw tightened. Clara deserves justice. Clara deserves a lot of things. But killing Mercer in cold blood won't bring her back. It will just turn you into someone your wife wouldn't recognize. The silence stretched. Marcus's hand trembled with the effort of restraint, every instinct screaming for him to pull the trigger to avenge everything he had lost. Then Sophie's voice echoed in his memory. "Promise you'll come back, Grandpa. Promise." He lowered the weapon. "Get her out of my sight." Rachel moved forward, securing Mercer with professional efficiency. The surviving operators were restrained, their weapons collected, their communications disabled. Elena returned to the terminal. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus joined her, his voice rough with emotion. "Once you activate this, there's no going back. Valkyrie is gone forever. That's the point. The client list disappears with it. The evidence we need to prosecute everyone involved. We have copies, cross-made backups. Senator Chen has enough to launch investigations. It won't be enough to convict everyone." "No." Elena met his eyes. "But it will be enough to scare them. To make them spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders, to ensure they know exposure is always possible." She thought about her father's final messages, his desperate attempt to destroy what he had built, his hope that his daughter would never know the truth. He had failed to protect her from knowledge, but she could complete what he had started. Some things matter more than perfect justice. Her hand hovered over the activation key. Sophie growing up safe, you being free, building something real instead of living in shadows. Marcus covered her hand with his own. Together. They pressed the key together. The screen displayed Cascade Protocol initiating. Numbers scrolled as the system propagated destruction through every Valkyrie deployment worldwide. In 17 countries on secure servers and classified installations, the technology that had killed hundreds began to consume itself. Valkyrie was dead. Elena exhaled a breath she had not known she was holding. "It's done." "Yes." Marcus pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with desperate strength. "It's done." They stood there in the bunker her father had built, surrounded by the wreckage of an empire constructed on secrets and blood. Mercer was in custody. The network was exposed. The kill switch had served its purpose. None of it would bring back Clara or Tommy or Edward Hartwell. None of it would erase the hundreds of deaths that Valkyrie had caused. But Sophie was safe. They were alive. And somehow, impossibly, they had found each other in the middle of a war neither had chosen. "We should go." Elena finally pulled back. "Sophie will be waiting." "Yes." Marcus's voice carried exhaustion and relief in equal measure. "Let's go home." They found Frank on the porch of the Virginia safe house, watching the sunset with a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses already poured. Sophie was inside asleep, unaware that the war was over. Marcus settled into the chair beside his oldest friend. Neither spoke for a long moment. The bourbon was good, smooth, and warm, the kind of drink that forgave silences. "Clara would be proud of you," Frank finally said. "Clara would tell me I waited too long." "Probably. She always did have opinions about your timing." Frank refilled both glasses. "But you finished it. That's what matters." "I almost didn't. Almost pulled the trigger on Mercer right there in the bunker." "What stopped you?" Marcus stared into the amber liquid, seeing ghosts. "Sophie. The thought of coming back to her as the man who executed someone in cold blood." He paused. "Clara stopped counting the bodies I created. Said she loved the man, not the mission. But there's a line, Frank. A line where the mission becomes the man. I've been walking that edge for 30 years. And now I'm tired of walking it. Tired of being the weapon. Tired of calculating threat assessments every time I enter a room. Frank nodded slowly. You know, it never fully goes away. The training, the instincts. 20 years from now, you'll still check exits and sightlines, still wake up reaching for a weapon that isn't there. I know. But it doesn't have to be everything anymore. You've got the woman, the kid, the chance to build something instead of tear things down. Frank raised his glass. Not many of us get that chance. Don't waste it. Marcus clinked his glass against Frank's. To second chances. To second chances. And to Clara, wherever she is, probably shaking her head at both of us. Probably. They sat together as darkness fell, two old soldiers who had seen too much and somehow survived to see peace. The bourbon disappeared slowly. The silence was comfortable, the kind that only existed between people who had bled together and buried friends together, and somehow kept going anyway. You're going to be okay, Ghost. Frank's voice was soft. You're going to be okay. Marcus looked toward the house where Sophie slept, where Elena was probably watching from a window where something that felt like family was waiting for him. Yeah, I think I am. The first week was the hardest. Marcus could not sleep. Every sound triggered assessment protocols burned into his nervous system over 3 decades. Every shadow held potential threats. Every moment of peace felt borrowed temporary waiting to be shattered by the next crisis. He found himself on the penthouse balcony at 3 a.m. most nights, watching the city that never slept, feeling like the only person in the world who understood what it meant to be awake when everyone else dreamed. Elena found him there on the 4th night. You're not sleeping. I'm not sure I remember how. He did not turn from the view. For 28 years, sleep was tactical. 4 hours maximum, always ready to move, always listening for the sound that meant death was coming. Death isn't coming anymore. My body knows that. My nervous system doesn't. He finally looked at her. I'm sorry. You didn't sign up for a broken man who haunts balconies at 3 in the morning. I signed up for a business arrangement. I got something else entirely. Elena moved to stand beside him. And broken isn't permanent. Broken can heal. Some things don't heal. They just scar over. Then we live with scars. Together. She took his hand, and they stood together watching the city lights, 2 people learning how to exist in a world that no longer required them to fight. Sophie asked me yesterday if bad dreams ever stop. Marcus's voice was rough. I told her they get quieter. I'm not sure that's true. Make it true. For her. For us. For yourself. He squeezed her hand. I'm trying. I know. That's enough. For now, trying is enough. The weeks passed slowly, then faster. The nightmares faded, not disappearing but diminishing, losing their sharp edges. Marcus learned to sleep again first, in fits and starts, then in longer stretches. He learned to hear sounds without reaching for weapons, to see shadows without calculating angles of attack. It was not recovery. It was something more like renovation. Taking a structure built for war and slowly, painfully converting it for peace. 6 months later, Manhattan looked the same from the penthouse windows. Glass towers reaching toward clouds, traffic flowing through arteries of concrete and steel. The endless pulse of a city that never stopped moving, never stopped building, never stopped destroying and rebuilding itself. But everything else had changed. Elena stood in the kitchen watching Marcus cook breakfast. Actual cooking, not heating leftovers or ordering delivery. Eggs and bacon and toast prepared with the same methodical precision he had once applied to tactical operations. Sophie sat at the table doing homework occasionally, asking questions about fractions that her grandfather answered with more patience than Elena could have mustered. This was the life she had accidentally built, not the arrangement they had signed. Something earned through violence and testimony and choosing each other when easier options existed. Mama E. Sophie looked up from her math problems. Can we go to the park today? After your homework. But fractions are hard. Hard things are worth doing. That's how you grow. Sophie considered this with a seriousness she applied to all important matters. Is that why you and Grandpa did the hard things to grow? Elena exchanged a glance with Marcus. They had explained the events of 6 months ago in terms Sophie could understand. Bad people doing bad things. Good people stopping them. Family protecting each other. Yes, sweetheart. Exactly like that. The congressional investigations had concluded 3 weeks ago. Senator Chen's committee had recommended criminal prosecution for 12 individuals, including Diana Mercer. Walter Kensington had resigned from Hartwell Defense and was cooperating with authorities in exchange for reduced charges. Richard Dawes was awaiting trial on multiple counts of conspiracy and obstruction. Not everyone would face consequences. Some fish were too big to fry without burning down the entire kitchen, as Chen had put it, but the network was broken, the clients were scattered, and Valkyrie's death had sent a message that some lines should never be crossed. Hartwell Defense itself had survived restructured under new leadership and genuine oversight. Elena had stepped back from day-to-day operations, promoting people she trusted to positions where they could implement real reform. The company would never be what her father had built. That was probably for the best. Breakfast is ready. Marcus set plates on the table, his movements easy and domestic in ways that still surprised Elena. The weapon he had worn constantly for months was locked in a safe. The ancient Nokia had been replaced with a normal phone. The habits of a lifetime were slowly, painfully being unlearned. They ate together, the three of them, conversation flowing naturally around school and work and the ordinary concerns of ordinary families. Sophie described her best friend's birthday party. Marcus mentioned the fishing trip they had planned for the weekend. Elena talked about a charitable foundation she was establishing in her father's name funding programs to help veterans transition to civilian life. Small things, meaningless things. Things that somehow felt like they mattered more than all the secrets and violence that had brought them together. Later that morning, Elena found Marcus in the small study off the master bedroom, a room he had claimed for the few possessions he considered truly his. He sat in the leather chair by the window holding a photograph she had never seen before. A woman with dark hair and laughing eyes caught mid-gesture clearly in the middle of telling a story. Beautiful in the way that came from joy rather than arrangement. Clara. Marcus did not look up. Taken 6 months before she died. We were at some conference in Vienna, and she was explaining why the CIA's budgeting process was fundamentally broken. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She could make spreadsheets sound like poetry when she wanted to. Elena sat on the arm of his chair looking at the woman who had come before her. She was beautiful. She was everything. Marcus's voice was quiet without self-pity. And I spent half our marriage in places I couldn't tell her about, doing things I couldn't explain. She deserved better. She chose you. She chose who she thought I could become. I'm not sure I ever got there. Elena touched his shoulder. You're getting there now. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he set the photograph on the small table beside the chair, positioning it so Clara's face caught the morning light. I used to talk to her. After she died, stand in front of her picture and tell her about Sophie, about the investigation, about the walls I was building to keep from feeling anything. He looked up at Elena. I don't do that anymore. Why not? Because I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm living. He took her hand. She would have liked you. Would have said you were exactly the kind of stubborn, brilliant, impossible woman I needed. I'm not sure that's a compliment. From Clara, it would have been the highest praise. After breakfast, Sophie disappeared to her room to finish homework. Marcus and Elena lingered at the table, coffee cooling between them. Frank called this morning. Marcus traced patterns on the tablecloth. There's a job offer, private security consulting, good money, interesting work. Are you considering it? 6 months ago, I would have jumped at it. Something to do with skills I actually have instead of pretending to be normal. And now, he looked up, meeting her eyes. Now I'm thinking about Sophie's school play next month, about the fishing trip, about whether we should get a dog. Elena felt warmth spread through her chest. A dog. Sophie's been hinting, subtly for a 6-year-old, which means she mentioned it 14 times yesterday. What kind of dog? She has very specific opinions. Apparently, it needs to be fluffy, but not too fluffy big, but not scary, and preferably named Princess Sparkle. Elena laughed a sound she had not made enough in her 45 years. Princess Sparkle, it is. Marcus reached across the table, taking her hand. I never thought I'd have this again. After Clara, after Tommy, I thought that part of my life was over. Family, happiness, normal things. And now I'm sitting in a penthouse kitchen discussing dog names with a woman I married for convenience, and all I can think about is how lucky I am that everything went wrong. Elena squeezed his hand. Everything went wrong, and somehow we ended up here. Strange path to happiness. The only one we had. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other through circumstances neither would have chosen, building something real from the wreckage of impossible situations. Sophie reappeared homework, apparently finished, vibrating with 6-year-old energy. Can we go to the park now? Please, I finished all my fractions. Marcus stood stretching muscles that still ached from decades of abuse, but complained less than they used to. Get your coat. It's cold outside. Will you push me on the swings, Grandpa? As high as you want. Sophie ran to get her coat. Elena watched her go, marveling at the resilience of children, their ability to find joy in the simplest pleasures, even after witnessing the edges of adult darkness. She's going to be okay. Marcus read her expression. Kids are tougher than we give them credit for. I know. I just wish she hadn't had to be tough. She has us. That's more than a lot of kids get. Elena stood moving to stand beside him at the window. Manhattan spread below them, indifferent to the dramas playing out in its towers and streets. Somewhere out there, the remnants of Valkyrie's network were rebuilding their lives, nursing grudges perhaps, plotting revenge. But that was a problem for another day. Right now, there was a park to visit, swings to push a family to cherish. Ready? Marcus offered his hand. Elena took it. Ready. They collected Sophie, bundled into a coat that was slightly too big for her, bouncing with anticipation. The elevator ride down was filled with chatter about swings and slides and the ice cream she was already negotiating for. The park was crowded with Sunday families. Children running and screaming with pure joy. Parents watching from benches simultaneously exhausted and fulfilled. Dogs chasing balls and each other, adding to the cheerful chaos. Marcus pushed Sophie on the swings higher and higher, her delighted shrieks carrying across the playground. Elena watched from a bench, coffee warming her hands, something unfamiliar and wonderful warming her heart. A golden retriever bounded past, chasing a tennis ball with the single-minded joy that only dogs seemed capable of. Sophie's eyes tracked the animal with naked longing, and Elena made a mental note. Christmas was coming. Some presents were more important than others. Frank Delgado appeared beside her, lowering himself onto the bench with a grunt. She looks happy. She is happy. And you? Elena considered the question. 3 months ago, she would not have known how to answer it. Happiness had been an abstract concept, something other people experienced while she focused on earnings reports and market projections. I'm learning what happy feels like. Frank nodded his weathered face, thoughtful. Marcus is different, lighter. I've known him 30 years, and I've never seen him like this. Like what? Like someone who's not waiting for the next mission. The next threat. The next reason to be Ghost instead of Marcus. Elena watched the man in question spin Sophie around both of them, laughing at something only they found funny. He's still in there, the soldier, the operative. I see it sometimes when something unexpected happens. The way he assesses threats before he relaxes. That never goes away. Not completely. But it doesn't have to define him anymore. Frank turned to look at her directly. You did that. You and Sophie gave him something worth being soft for. I didn't do anything except show up. Sometimes showing up is everything. They sat in companionable silence, watching Marcus and Sophie play. The sun broke through clouds, casting golden light across the playground. For a moment, everything was perfect, peaceful, normal. Elena's phone buzzed. A message from Senator Chen. Final report submitted. Mercer plea deal accepted. 25 years, no parole. It's really over. She showed the message to Frank. He read it, nodded, then deleted it from her phone. Some things don't need to be saved. No, they don't. Marcus returned with Sophie on his shoulders, both of them flushed with cold and joy. Mama E. Grandpa says we can get ice cream. Did he now? I said maybe. Marcus's eyes twinkled. Which apparently translates to definitely in 6-year-old. Please, I ate all my breakfast and did all my homework, and I've been very good. Elena pretended to consider. Sophie's expression shifted through hope, anxiety, and determination in rapid succession. I suppose ice cream could be arranged. Sophie's celebration was immediate and enthusiastic, involving significant bouncing and what might have been a victory dance. They walked to the ice cream shop as a family. Marcus held Sophie's hand on one side, Elena on the other. Frank followed a few steps behind guardian and friend, part of the strange extended family they had assembled from broken pieces. The shop was warm and crowded, full of other families seeking the same simple pleasure. Sophie deliberated over flavors with the gravity of someone making life-altering decisions. Marcus ordered the same thing he always did, vanilla with chocolate sauce, reliable and unpretentious. Elena tried something new, a seasonal flavor that turned out to be better than expected. They sat at a table by the window watching people pass on the sidewalk outside. Normal people living normal lives. No idea that the woman eating ice cream had helped destroy an assassination network. No idea that the man beside her had killed more people than most soldiers in active combat. No idea that their happiness was built on sacrifice and blood and choices that could never be fully explained. But that was okay. Some stories were meant to stay hidden. Some truths served no purpose in the light. What mattered was this moment, this family, this hard-won, improbable, precious normal. Mama E, Sophie's voice interrupted Elena's thoughts. Yes, sweetheart. Are you going to stay forever? The question hit with unexpected force. Elena looked at Marcus, found him watching with an expression that suggested the answer mattered to him as much as it did to Sophie. Forever is a long time. I know, but are you... Elena thought about her answer, about the contracts they had signed and the arrangement that had started everything, about the promises she had made to herself never to depend on anyone, never to need anyone, never to let anyone close enough to hurt her. Those promises seemed foolish now. Walls built by someone who did not understand that the things worth having required the risk of losing. Yes, the word came easily. I'm going to stay forever. Sophie nodded, satisfied, returning her attention to ice cream that was beginning to drip down the cone. Marcus reached under the table, found Elena's hand squeezed. Forever sounds good to me. Even with the Princess Sparkle negotiations. Especially with the Princess Sparkle negotiations. They finished their ice cream and walked home through streets that felt different now. Familiar, safe, somewhere they belonged rather than somewhere they were hiding. The penthouse welcomed them back with warmth and light. Sophie immediately demanded the promised trip to research dog breeds. Marcus settled onto the couch with her laptop balanced on his knee, patiently explaining the differences between golden retrievers and labradoodles. Elena stood in the kitchen doorway, watching them. Her father had built an empire on secrets and death, had tried to redeem himself, and failed, had left her a legacy of corruption and guilt that should have destroyed everything she cared about. Instead, it had brought her here, to a family she never expected, to love she never sought, to happiness she never believed she deserved. Strange paths led to unexpected destinations. Sometimes the worst things that happened turned out to be the beginning of the best things possible. The phone rang. Elena glanced at the screen. Hartwell Defense Corporate Line. Probably another crisis, another decision, another demand on time she would rather spend with the people in her living room. She declined the call. Whatever it was could wait until Monday. Right now, there were more important things to attend to, like choosing a name for a dog that would probably not be called Princess Sparkle, no matter how much Sophie insisted. Like building a life that had nothing to do with quarterly reports or board meetings or the weight of inherited empires. Like being present, truly present for the family she had accidentally found and intentionally chosen to keep. Elena walked into the living room, settled onto the couch beside Marcus, and Sophie added her voice to the debate about fluffy versus very fluffy dogs. Outside Manhattan continued its endless pulse. Inside, three people who had found each other through circumstance and stayed together through choice created something new from the fragments of broken pasts. The arrangement had ended. The contract was forgotten. What remained was this family, love, home. And that in the end was the only thing that mattered. The story continues as evening settled over the city. Sophie fell asleep on the couch during movie night, her head pillowed on Elena's lap, one hand clutching the remote she had refused to surrender. Marcus covered her with a blanket, his movements gentle with the practiced ease of years of single parenting. She's exhausted. Happy exhausted. Elena stroked Sophie's hair. The good kind? Is there a good kind? There is now. They let the movie play, neither watching, both lost in thoughts they did not need to share. The comfortable silence of people who had learned each other's rhythms, who no longer needed words to communicate. I've been thinking about the house. Marcus finally broke the quiet. What house? The one we should probably buy, somewhere with a yard for Princess Sparkle, good schools nearby, room for Sophie to grow. Elena's heart rate increased. The penthouse had always been temporary even before she understood what temporary might become. A place to conduct business, to host board members, to project the image of success that her father had considered essential. It had never been a home. Where? I was looking at Connecticut, close enough to commute when you need to, far enough to feel like somewhere else. You've been researching. I've been imagining. He met her eyes. What our life could look like if we let it. Elena thought about the mansion she had grown up in, cold and formal, designed to impress rather than comfort. About the apartments she had occupied in various cities, functional spaces for a functional life. About the penthouse that had witnessed the strange alchemy of their relationship, where business arrangement became something neither had expected. Show me what you found. Marcus pulled up listings on his phone, scrolling through properties with commentary that revealed he had been considering this for longer than he admitted. This one has a barn that could be converted. This one has walking trails. This one has neighbors, but not too close. Elena listened, watching his face rather than the screens, seeing the hope he was trying to hide behind practical observations, recognizing the vulnerability of someone offering something precious and fearing rejection. The third one, she pointed to a colonial on 5 acres, white clapboard and black shutters, wraparound porch, and mature trees. That one feels right. It needs work. The inspection report mentions the roof, the plumbing. You like fixing things. You've fixed everything in this penthouse that could possibly break. This is different. This is building something instead of maintaining it. Elena took his hand. This is choosing permanence over convenience. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I never expected this. Any of this. 3 months ago, I was a ghost, pretending to be a janitor investigating a company because my wife was murdered. Now I'm looking at houses in Connecticut with the CEO's daughter and planning where to put the dog. Life doesn't follow the plans we make. No, it doesn't. He lifted her hand, pressed his lips to her knuckles. But sometimes it gives us better things than we planned for. Sophie stirred, murmuring something about sparkles and fluffy. They waited until she settled back into deeper sleep. Should we carry her to bed? In a minute. Elena looked down at the child who had changed everything without meaning to. I want to remember this, all of us together, before the house and the dog and whatever comes next. You talk like something's ending. Something is, the part where we're figuring out what we are to each other. She met his eyes. I know what we are now. I don't need to figure anymore. Marcus shifted closer, careful not to disturb Sophie. What are we? Family. The word felt right. True. Real family. Not the arrangement we started with, but what it became. Even knowing everything, the things I've done, the person I was, especially knowing everything. The person you were is part of who you are, but the person you're becoming is what matters. He kissed her forehead, gentle as the touch he used with Sophie. I love you. The words came rough, unpracticed. I don't think I said that before. Not directly. I should have. I know you love me. You show it every day. In coffee, that's exactly right. In the way you watch Sophie and me like you can't believe we're real. In 1,000 small things that matter more than words. Words matter too. Then hear mine. Elena cupped his face in her hands. I love you. Not despite who you were, but because of who you're becoming. I love Sophie like she's my own child. I love this strange family we've built from broken pieces. And I want the house in Connecticut with the porch and the yard and Princess Sparkle causing chaos. Marcus's eyes were bright, 54 years old, and he looked younger than she had ever seen him. Lighter, free. We should schedule a viewing. Tomorrow. Sophie will want to come. Sophie will definitely want to come. She'll have opinions about everything. She has opinions about everything already. She comes by it honestly. They laughed softly, careful not to wake the sleeping child between them. Outside, the city continued its endless motion. Inside, three people who had found each other through circumstance and chosen each other through love settled into the ordinary miracle of family. The past was behind them. The future was uncertain as all futures are. But this moment was theirs. And moments strung together, one after another, were what made a life. Marcus eventually carried Sophie to bed, tucking her in with the tenderness that still surprised Elena after all these months. The man who had killed over 100 people, who had spent decades as a weapon, pointed at enemies of the state who had survived betrayals and losses that would have destroyed most people, became something entirely different when he held his granddaughter. That transformation was the truest thing about him. The violence was real. The gentleness was more real. Both existed in the same person because people were complicated, contradictory, capable of terrible things and beautiful things in equal measure. Elena understood that now. She had spent her life believing in simple categories: winners and losers, successes and failures, good people and bad people. Her father had taught her to see the world that way, to organize it into manageable boxes that made decision-making efficient. But life resisted boxes. People overflowed categories. The man her father had been, the woman she was becoming, the family they had accidentally created, none of it fit the neat schemas she had been taught. And that was okay. Messiness was part of being human. The broken pieces were what made the whole beautiful. Marcus returned from Sophie's room, finding Elena on the balcony watching the city lights. Cold out here. I know. She did not move. I'm thinking. About what? About how different everything looks from here than it did 3 months ago. Same view, same city, but I'm not the same person looking at it. Marcus stood beside her, close enough to touch, but not quite touching. Who are you now? Someone I'm still figuring out, but someone I like better than the person I was. What changed? Everything. Elena turned to face him. You, Sophie, learning the truth about my father, finding out that the life I built was constructed on lies. That sounds like loss. It was loss. It is loss. But loss created space for something else. She gestured toward the penthouse, toward the room where Sophie slept, toward the life they had built. For this. For real things instead of constructed things. Marcus considered her words. I used to think I couldn't have real things, that the person I'd become couldn't exist in normal life, couldn't be trusted with gentle things. What do you think now? I think I was wrong. I think the person I was and the person I'm becoming can coexist. That the skills I learned don't have to define how I use them. What do you want to use them for? protecting Sophie, protecting you, building something worth defending instead of destroying things that need to fall. Elena took his hand. Then that's what we'll do, together. They stood on the balcony as the city lights flickered below two people who had traveled impossible paths to find each other. The past was written in scars and secrets. The future was uncharted territory, but they would face it together. That was enough. That was everything. Morning brought new beginnings. Sophie bounced awake with her usual energy, immediately asking about the house viewing Marcus had mentioned the night before. Elena made breakfast while Marcus fielded questions about Connecticut yards and the ongoing Princess Sparkle campaign. Can we really get a dog, Mama E? We can discuss it. Grandpa said you said yes. I said we could get a dog. I did not agree to Princess Sparkle as a name. What about Sir Fluffington? That's worse. Duchess McWoofles? Marcus choked on his coffee. We'll discuss names when we have an actual dog. Elena set plates on the table. For now, eat your breakfast. Sophie attacked her eggs with enthusiasm, her mind clearly racing through canine possibilities. Marcus caught Elena's eye, his expression warm with shared amusement. This was their life now. Breakfast negotiations and dog names and the ordinary chaos of family. Not the arrangement they had signed. Not the mission that had brought them together. Just people who loved each other figuring out each day as it came. After breakfast, they drove to Connecticut. The house was even better in person than in pictures. White clapboard gleaming in the autumn sunshine. Trees in full fall color reds and golds creating a canopy over the long driveway. The wraparound porch that Marcus had mentioned complete with swing seats and room for summer evenings. Sophie was immediately enchanted. It's like a castle. Can I have the tower room? There isn't a tower. Can we build one? The real estate agent gave them space to explore. Sensing that this was not a casual viewing, Elena walked through rooms that felt right in ways she could not explain. Big windows, hardwood floors, a kitchen that invited gathering. Marcus examined everything with professional thoroughness, checking foundations and electrical panels and plumbing connections. Finding problems, certainly, but nothing that could not be fixed. What do you think? Elena found him in the basement studying water heater specifications. I think it needs work. The roof should be replaced within 2 years. The plumbing is functional, but aging. The electrical panel should be upgraded. That's not what I asked. He straightened, meeting her eyes. I think it feels like home. I think so, too. They made an offer that afternoon. The house needed inspection negotiation, the tedious machinery of real estate transactions. But the decision was made. They were building something permanent. 3 weeks later, they closed on the property. Sophie claimed her room immediately, a corner bedroom with windows on 2 sides and a window seat she pronounced perfect for reading. Marcus began the long process of repairs and improvements, applying skills honed in very different contexts to the peaceful work of making a house a home. Elena commuted to Manhattan when necessary, but found herself needed less and less as the new leadership at Hartwell Defense proved capable. The company was changing, evolving into something she could be proud of, rather than something she had to defend. The charitable foundation launched in December, funding programs for veterans and supporting families affected by violence. Edward Hartwell's name would be attached to healing instead of harm. His legacy rewritten by his daughter's choices. Christmas arrived with snow. Sophie woke them at dawn, practically vibrating with excitement about presents and trees and the magic of the season. Marcus made hot chocolate, while Elena supervised the strategic unwrapping of gifts. Under the tree, amid the expected presents, was a large box with holes in the side. "What's that one?" Sophie's eyes widened. "Why don't you open it and find out?" The puppy was a golden retriever mix from the local shelter, approximately 4 months old, enthusiastic beyond all reason. Sophie's scream of delight probably disturbed neighbors half a mile away. "Can I really keep her? Is she really mine?" "She's really yours. What are you going to name her?" Sophie looked at the squirming bundle of golden fur in her arms, considering with the gravity of someone making a decision of tremendous importance. "Honey. Because she's golden like honey." Elena met Marcus's eyes over Sophie's head. He was smiling the unguarded expression of a man who had found something worth protecting and intended to protect it forever. "Honey is perfect," Elena said. The puppy licked Sophie's face, sealing the decision with canine enthusiasm. Later, after presents and breakfast and the chaos of a new puppy exploring her home, they sat on the porch watching snow fall over their yard. Sophie had finally crashed exhausted by excitement, napping on the couch with Honey curled beside her. "Merry Christmas." Marcus handed Elena a mug of coffee, settling into the porch swing beside her. "Merry Christmas." They rocked gently, watching snowflakes drift through bare branches. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong." Marcus's voice was soft. "For the other shoe to drop. For this to turn out to be too good to last." "Does that feeling ever go away?" "I don't know. I've never had this long enough to find out." Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then we find out together. However long it lasts, we find out together." He kissed the top of her head. "I love you." "I know," she smiled. "I love you too." The snow continued falling, covering the world in white, transforming familiar landscapes into something magical and new. Inside, a child slept with her dog. On the porch, 2 people who had traveled impossible paths to find each other watched winter arrive. The arrangement had ended. The contract was forgotten. What remained was this family, love, home. Some things could not be planned or predicted. Some things emerged from chaos and loss and desperate choices made in midnight offices. Some things were more precious for being unexpected. Elena thought about her father, about the empire he had built, and the secrets he had kept, and the destruction he had caused. About his final attempt at redemption and its tragic failure. About the message he had left her coordinates to a kill switch that represented his last hope of making things right. He would never know what his daughter had become. Never see the family she had built from the wreckage of his legacy. Never understand that his final act of defiance had somehow led to this moment of peace. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the point was not what he knew or did not know. Maybe the point was what she chose to do with what he left behind. She had chosen love, chosen family, chosen to build instead of destroy. That choice, made again each day, was what mattered. The snow fell softly. The swing creaked gently. Inside, a puppy yawned and a child dreamed. And Elena Hartwell Cole, who had married a stranger to save a company and found something infinitely more valuable, watched winter settle over her home and felt for the first time in 45 years completely at peace.